Greetings, fellow fans. You're tuned into DC Harry, presenting to you today, what if Black Canary found Harry age 6 and fierce warrior woman fell in love with magical boy forever? Show some love by liking and subscribing. Enjoy the story ahead. Chapter 1, The Alley. The rain had been falling for 3 hours and showed no interest in stopping. Dinah Lance crouched on a fire escape above Nocturne Alley's mundane London cousin, a nameless cut-through between Whitechapel's back streets that smelled like wet cardboard and old cooking oil, and watched the door of a warehouse that was supposed to be full of illegal arms and was instead full of nothing. No movement. No heat signatures on the thermal scope clipped to her jacket. No guards, no shipment, no Arnie Kellerman, who was supposed to be concluding a sale of military-grade hardware to 3 gentlemen with Eastern European passports and very bad intentions. Empty. The whole thing was empty. Ollie. She pressed the calm bead behind her ear. Tell me your side has something, because mine is a complete washout. Oliver Queen's voice crackled in her ear with the particular tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news wrapped in confidence. Kellerman's van turned off the A13 20 minutes ago. He's not coming. He made us. Somebody made us. I'm not saying it was you. It wasn't me. I'm not saying it was you. Dinah straightened up, her leather jacket shedding water in rivulets, and looked out over the rooftops. The Thames was a dark smear in the middle distance. London at midnight in November was the color of a bruise, purple-black sky, orange streetlight, everything wet and reflective and cold. She'd been in position for 4 hours. Her knees were singing. Her coffee thermos had run out 2 hours ago, and the rain had found that specific gap between her collar and her neck that no amount of repositioning ever quite fixed. Pull back, she said. We'll reacquire tomorrow. He'll move the shipment within 48 hours or the buyers walk. Already heading to the car. There's a kebab place on the Mile End Road that's still open. Get me too. Obviously. She clicked the comm off and started moving, down the fire escape, iron rung slick under her gloves, landing in the alley below with a sound that was barely louder than the rain. She rolled her shoulders, let the disappointment of the wasted night settle and pass, and turned toward the street. That was when she heard it. Not crying, she might have missed crying. Rain covered crying, traffic covered crying, the city swallowed crying whole and never noticed. What she heard was smaller than crying. It was the sound of someone trying not to cry and failing in very small, controlled increments, hitched breaths, barely voiced, the sound of someone who had learned that louder grief brought consequences. She stopped walking. The sound was coming from behind the large industrial bin at the alley's dead end, 8 feet of concrete wall rising behind it, no door, no exit. She'd dismissed that corner on her initial sweep because it was a dead end and she'd been looking for armed smugglers, not. She moved around the bin. The boy was tucked into the angle between the bin and the wall, knees pulled to his chest, arms wrapped around them, making himself as small as physically possible. He was soaked through, the oversized shirt he was wearing had gone translucent with rain, plastered to a frame that was too thin in ways that had nothing to do with genetics and everything to do with portions. His hair was dark and sticking to his forehead. His glasses, round, taped at one hinge, were fogged and rain-speckled and probably useless. He looked up when he heard her land. Even with the bad light and the rain and the glasses, she could see the color of his eyes. Green, not hazel, not gray-green, not the kind of green that hedged its bets. Actual, vivid, impossible green, like someone had taken the color seriously. And ringed around the left one, fresh and darkening, the unmistakable geography of a fist. He was maybe 6 years old. Dinah went very still in the way she went still before a fight, not frozen, not hesitant, but gathered. Every part of her attention arriving at the same point simultaneously. He didn't flinch away from her. He looked at her with those green eyes and his chin came up about a centimeter, this tiny, instinctive, heartbreaking display of defiance from a child who had clearly learned that showing fear made things worse. "Hi," she said. She didn't crouch, didn't want to loom, so she sat down on the wet ground beside the bin without ceremony, putting herself at his level. The cold went through her immediately. She ignored it. He stared at her. The chin stayed up. "I'm Dinah," she said. "What's your name?" A pause. Long enough that she thought he might not answer. Then, "Harry." His voice was small but not scared. Or rather, it was scared and performing not scared with a stubborn commitment she found, even in this moment, genuinely impressive. "Harry," she said. "Okay. Are you hurt anywhere besides your eye?" Something moved across his face, surprise, maybe, that she'd asked about the eyes so directly, without pretending not to see it. "No," he said. She didn't believe him but she let it sit. "How long have you been out here?" He thought about it. "Since it got dark." 3 hours, at least. "In November." In a soaked shirt. "Are you from around here?" "Little whinging," he said. "In Surrey." He paused. "I got on the train." Dinah looked at him, 6 years old, alone, on the wrong side of London, in the rain, with a black eye, and felt something move in her chest that she didn't immediately have a name for. It wasn't pity. Pity was soft and distant. This was closer to the feeling she got when she walked into a situation that was irreversibly, unacceptably wrong and her body made the decision before her brain had finished the sentence. "Are you hungry?" she said. The chin wobbled, just for a second. "A bit," he said, which almost certainly meant desperately. She reached into her jacket and found the protein bar she'd stuck in her inside pocket at 6 this evening, chocolate and peanut, bent in half from being sat on at some point. She held it out. He looked at it, then at her, and she could see him calculating something. Running some kind of internal math about strangers and offers and what things cost. "It's just a protein bar," she said. "No strings." He took it. He didn't tear into it immediately, which told her something else about him. He unwrapped it carefully, took a moderate bite, chewed it. Like someone who had learned not to look too hungry. She pressed her calm, "Ollie. Change of plans. The kebabs, get them. And then come pick me up. I'm sending you a pin." She paused. "And Ollie. I have a kid." Static. Then, "Come again. I have a child. He's about 6. He's got a black eye and he's been in the rain for 3 hours and he took the train from Surrey alone in the dark and I need you to come get us." Longer pause. "Dinah, Oliver." Her voice was calm and entirely immovable. "Come get us." He came. Harry had eaten the protein bar in its entirety by the time she'd finished the call, slowly and with great seriousness, like it was a task that deserved full attention. She watched him out of the corner of her eye and didn't say anything about the way he held his left arm slightly away from his side when he shifted position, protecting his ribs. Not his eye, she noted. He didn't protect his eye because he'd decided that pain was manageable if you held still. But ribs caught you by surprise. Ribs you couldn't help flinching around. "Is there someone I should call?" she said. "A parent? Someone who'll be looking for you?" He considered this with the same careful deliberation he'd applied to the protein bar. "My aunt and uncle," he said. "I live with them. My mum and dad are dead." He said the last part with a flatness that wasn't emotional numbness, it was just a fact he'd been given so early and so bluntly that it had become part of the geography of his world, like the color of the walls. "What are their names?" "Your aunt and uncle. Mr. and Mrs. Dursley." A beat. "Vernon and Petunia. Would they be worried about you?" He looked at her. It was a very particular look, not evasive, not defensive. Just honest in the way only small children and very old people manage to be honest, the kind that had given up on managing other people's reactions. "Probably not," he said. Dinah breathed through her nose. Carefully. "Okay," she said. She texted Oliver the pin and they sat in companionable silence for a while, the rain falling steadily around them, the alley dark and damp and oddly quiet. Dinah became aware, slowly, that the rain directly above them had thinned. Not stopped, exactly. But the heaviest of it seemed to be angling away from their particular spot, as if redirected by something invisible just above their heads. She looked up. Nothing there. She looked at Harry. He was watching a puddle near his feet with an expression of moderate concentration. As she watched, the puddle rippled, pushed sideways by nothing, like an invisible hand had stirred it. She kept her face neutral. "Harry," she said conversationally. "Did you do that?" He looked up immediately, guilty and braced for something. Whatever the thing was that usually followed. "I didn't mean to," he said, the words coming fast and worn smooth with repetition, clearly a phrase he'd used many times before. "I'm sorry, it just happens, I can't always, hey." She kept her voice even. "I'm not angry." He stopped. Stared at her. "I'm not angry," she said again. "Does it happen a lot? Things moving? Or the rain?" He looked at her for a long moment, recalibrating. "Sometimes," he said carefully. "When I'm scared. Or upset." He paused. "Or when I don't want to get wet." "That's reasonable," she said. Something cracked open in his face, not dramatically, not explosively. Just a small, private opening, like a window unsticking after years of being painted shut. He looked back at the puddle and, just slightly, she could see it, let himself push it again. The water moved in a slow circle, against the direction of the rain's runoff, turning like something alive. Oliver's car turned into the alley entrance 3 minutes later, headlights sweeping across them. Dinah stood up and then, without really deciding to, held her hand out to Harry. He looked at it. Looked at her. Then he put his small, cold, rain-wet hand in hers, and she folded her fingers around it, and they walked out of the alley together. Oliver was standing by the car with a paper bag that smelled of cumin and charred meat, and he took one look at Harry, the soaked shirt, the ribs showing at the hem, the black eye, the hand in Dinah's, the way Harry looked up at Oliver with that chin-up assessment, and his face did something complicated and then went carefully neutral. "Hi, kid," he said. "You like kebabs?" Harry looked at the bag. "I've never had one," he said. Oliver looked at Dinah over Harry's head. She looked back. Something passed between them that wasn't quite words, a conversation that had been waiting to happen since she'd pressed that calm bead and said "I have a child" in a voice that Oliver, who had known Dinah for years, had apparently already understood. "Get in the car," Oliver said. "It's warm." They sat in the back together while Oliver drove, Harry in the middle, eating a kebab with both hands and a focus that was simultaneously heartbreaking and deeply impressive. Dinah ate her own and watched the city go past the window and felt the weight of the decision she was already making settle into her bones like it was making a home there. She was a vigilante. She lived in a 2-bedroom flat in Canary Wharf that Oliver paid half the rent on as a function of their complicated professional and personal arrangement, and which contained exactly enough furniture to be functional and not one piece more. She had a duffel bag of gear under her bed, a medical kit that was better stocked than most hospital supply rooms, and a coffee maker she genuinely loved. She had no plants, no goldfish, no houseplants, nothing living, because living things required consistency, and she had spent the last 4 years being the opposite of consistent. She had never once thought about being a mother. Not seriously. Not as a real future she was moving toward. She had thought about it the way she thought about living in Rome, as a nice idea that belonged to a different version of herself. Sitting in the back of Oliver's car next to a 6-year-old with green eyes who was eating a kebab like it was the best thing he'd ever tasted, which it probably was, she found that all of that had become suddenly and completely irrelevant. She was keeping him. She'd known it in the alley, if she was honest. She'd known it the moment he'd lifted his chin. The flat was warm. Harry stood in the middle of the small living room and looked at everything with those serious, measuring eyes, cataloging the space with the efficiency of a child who'd learned to assess environments quickly. Dinah watched him notice the training equipment visible through the open door of the second bedroom, the striking pad hung on one wall, the resistance bands on the hook, the worn floor mat. His gaze settled on these for a moment longer than on everything else. "The bathroom's down the hall," she said. "There are towels in the cupboard, just grab whatever. And I'll find you something to sleep in." She paused. "Are you still hungry? I've got eggs." "Yes please," he said, and then added, with that same careful politeness, "if it's not too much trouble." Something in her chest turned over like a stone. If it's not too much trouble. 6 years old. "It's not too much trouble," she said. She made eggs. Oliver sat at the counter and watched Harry sit at the kitchen table and eat them with the same whole attention focus as the kebab, and Oliver's face was doing a thing she recognized, the thing it did when he had already arrived at an emotional conclusion but was currently engaged in a negotiation with himself about whether or not to admit it. She scrambled more eggs and put them in front of Oliver. "I'm calling social services in the morning," she said. "To report the Dursleys." She paused. "And to begin emergency foster care paperwork." Oliver's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "I looked it up on my phone," she said. "On the way here. The emergency pathway takes, Dinah. It takes between 3 and 6 months for a formal placement to be finalized, but emergency fostering can be authorized within, Dinah." His voice was gentle. Not arguing. Just making sure she was looking at him when she said the next part. "Are you sure?" She looked at Harry, who had finished the eggs and was now sitting with his chin on his folded arms on the table, watching the two of them with an expression of someone who understood that something was being decided about him and had chosen to wait rather than ask, because asking had historically not gone well for him. "Harry," she said. "Do you want to stay here tonight?" He sat up slightly. "Yes," he said. No elaboration. No hedging. Just yes. "Okay," she said. "What about a bit longer than tonight?" He was quiet for a moment. She could see him, very visibly, deciding whether to believe this was real. Whether to let himself want it. It was, she thought, the saddest and most impressive thing she'd ever watched a person do. "Okay," he said at last. She looked at Oliver. He looked back at her. He put his fork down. "I'll sleep on the couch," he said. "You give him the second bedroom." "You don't have to, I know I don't have to." He picked his fork back up. "Stop arguing with generosity. It's annoying." Harry looked at Oliver. "Thank you," he said. Oliver's face went through several things quickly. He cleared his throat. "Sure, kid," he said. "Sure." She found Harry a t-shirt of hers that reached his knees and a pair of jogging shorts that he had to hold up with one hand, and he went to the bathroom and came back scrubbed and damp and minutely more relaxed, the kind of relaxation that comes from being clean and warm and fed, the body overriding the mind's caution. She showed him the bedroom, the narrow bed with its plain navy covers, the small window looking out over the lights of the city. He climbed in and she pulled the covers up and then stood there in the doorway feeling entirely useless in the face of something enormous and completely necessary and not sure what came next. She'd sat with dying men in the field and known exactly what to say. She was at a loss with a 6-year-old in clean sheets. "Dinah," Harry said from under the covers. "Yeah. Why did you help me?" He said it with real curiosity, not suspicion. Like it was a puzzle he was trying to solve. She considered lying, or softening, at least. Saying something manageable. "Because you were alone and hurt and nobody should be that at your age," she said. "And because when I looked at you I couldn't not." He thought about this. "Okay," he said. Then, after a moment, "Are there other kids here?" "No. It's just me and Oliver. He's my partner. We work together." "Doing what?" She smiled. "Making sure bad people have a bad time." Something lit up in those green eyes that had not been there 5 minutes ago. Pure, unfiltered delight. How? He said. I'll tell you tomorrow, she said. Sleep. He settled back. She was almost at the door when his voice came again, softer. My eye doesn't hurt anymore, he said. It did before. Now it doesn't. She turned. He was looking at her in a matter-of-fact way, neither alarmed nor bragging. Just reporting. You're magic, she said. I think so. A pause. Is that okay? Yes, she said. That's okay. Good night, Harry. Good night, Dinah. She pulled the door to and stood in the hallway for a moment with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling and something moving through her chest like weather, vast and warm and slightly terrifying, the way the best things were. Oliver was still at the counter. He looked at her when she came back. He healed his own eye, she said. Oliver blinked. He what? He told me things move when he's upset. Or scared. And the rain was deflecting off us in the alley, not stopping, just, she gestured. Going around. Oliver was quiet for a moment. So he's, what? A mutant? I don't know. I don't think so. It felt different. She poured herself a glass of water. It felt older, somehow. Like it has rules that are just very different from the rules we know. Dinah. Oliver set his glass down. You can't just, I know. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying you need to know what you're walking into. A child who does, that. He gestured in the direction of the second bedroom. That has a history. Someone knows about him. Someone will come looking. Let them come, she said, and her voice had the quality it got in the field when she had already decided how something was going to end and was simply waiting for the world to catch up with her conclusion. Oliver looked at her for a long moment. Then he smiled, the real one, the one he hid most of the time. Yeah, he said. Okay. Let them come. The next 2 days were bureaucratic and exhausting in the specific way that doing the right thing through official channels always was. Dinah called social services at 7 in the morning, before Harry woke up, standing in the kitchen with coffee and a notepad, her voice flat and professional as she reported the Desley address in little whinging and listed what she'd observed, the black eye, the malnutrition indicators, the fact that a 6-year-old had traveled across London alone at night without, apparently, any adult making any effort to find him. The social worker on the other end of the call was tired but decent. She took the report seriously. She told Dinah they would send someone to the Desley address that day. She also, carefully, asked how the child had come to be with Dinah. I found him in an alley, Dinah said. I'm a licensed first responder. This was true. She had a paramedic license she'd obtained 6 years ago because it was useful to have in a number of professional contexts, some of which the licensing board would have found surprising. I assessed him for immediate danger and made the decision to bring him to a safe location. He was hypothermic and showing signs of physical abuse. I was not willing to leave him in the alley. That was the right call, the social worker said, and something in her voice shifted, warming slightly, becoming less procedural. We'll get someone out to you today as well, to do an assessment. Are you in a position to care for him in the interim? Yes, Dinah said. Are you registered as a foster carer? Not yet. But I'm beginning that process today. A pause. It takes time. I know. Whatever Harry needs in the interim, I will provide. The social worker, her name was Margaret, she told Dinah at the end of the call, came at 2 in the afternoon. She was a woman in her mid-50s with gray-streaked hair and the particularly careful eyes of someone who had seen too many situations like this one and had decided, somewhere along the way, to feel them all anyway instead of going numb. She sat on the living room floor with Harry and a box of building blocks that Oliver had acquired during a 45-minute absence that morning during which he claimed to have been, just out. He'd come back with building blocks, 2 coloring books, a set of colored pencils, and a child's winter jacket in dark green that was approximately the right size. Dinah had looked at the jacket. She had not said anything. Oliver had put the kettle on and also not said anything, and the moment had been, in its way, complete. Margaret watched Harry build a tower that was aerodynamically improbable and structurally, by any rational assessment, should have fallen twice already. It didn't fall. "He's not covering for them," she said quietly to Dinah, while Harry narrated the tower's construction to himself in a low voice. "Children often do, in situations like this." "He's not." "No," Dinah agreed. "He said his uncle," she paused, consulting her notes. "He said it matter-of-factly. No distress markers, which can mean the distress has been there so long he doesn't register it as abnormal anymore." She looked at Dinah. "He told me he likes it here. He's been here 18 hours. I know. He said the eggs were very good." A ghost of a smile. "He said you were very good." Dinah looked at Harry, who had added another improbable layer to the tower. "He's remarkable," she said, and meant it in more ways than she could currently put into language. Margaret left with a pile of paperwork for Dinah and a promise of a follow-up in 72 hours, and the information that the Dursleys had been visited and that Harry's things, what there were of them, would be collected and delivered. "They didn't fight it," she told Dinah at the door. "They seemed," a careful pause. "Relieved." Dinah thought about what she would like to say about that and said none of it. "Thank you, Margaret." The things arrived the next morning in a bin bag, truly, an actual bin bag, black plastic, containing 3 items of clothing that were Dudley Dursley's cast-offs and didn't fit Harry at all, a broken toy soldier, and a blanket that was so thin and worn it was essentially a theoretical bland. More actions right the next chapter now. Chapter 2, What We Keep. The first time Harry saw Dinah fight, he was 7 years old and it was an accident. She hadn't meant for him to see it. She'd arranged for Oliver to take him to the museum, the Natural History Museum, Harry's standing favorite, where he could spend 4 hours in front of the dinosaur gallery and needed no entertainment beyond that, while she dealt with what was supposed to be a quick intercept. Kellerman had finally surfaced, 5 months after the washed-out warehouse job, moving a smaller shipment through the docklands with a reduced crew and the overconfidence of someone who thought he'd gotten away with something. "Quick and clean," she told Oliver. 2 hours, maybe 3. Oliver had taken Harry to the museum. Harry had apparently stood in front of the Spinosaurus for 40 minutes, had questions that required the attendance of 2 separate museum staff members, and then asked if they could go to the gift shop, and Oliver, who had stared down warlords and drug barons, had said yes immediately and bought him a second Spinosaurus because the first one was starting to show wear, and Oliver had what Dinah was beginning to identify as a profound inability to say no to Harry when Harry wanted something reasonable. The thing was, Harry never wanted unreasonable things. He wanted books and information and the occasional dinosaur figurine. It would have been easier if he'd been demanding. They'd gotten back to the docklands at the wrong time because Oliver had misread the intercept window by 40 minutes and Dinah was still in the middle of it when the car pulled up. She had 4 of Kellerman's crew down already. Kellerman himself was backed against a shipping container with his hands up, which was where she wanted him, and she was in the process of delivering the specific message, physical and verbal, neither gentle, that would convince him to be cooperative when she became aware that Harry was standing 20 feet away at the chain-link fence watching her with his full, solemn, total attention. She clocked him, assessed the field, determined no immediate threat to him, and finished the conversation with Kellerman. It took another 3 minutes. Kellerman was, by the end, extremely willing to cooperate. She walked back to the fence. Harry was quiet. He was looking at her with those green eyes and the expression she'd come to know as his thinking face, very still, processing at speed, not ready to speak yet. Oliver was behind him looking like a man who had several things to say and was choosing none of them. "You okay?" she asked Harry. "Yes," he said. He paused. "You were talking while you were doing it." "That's important," she said. "Knowing why you're doing a thing while you're doing it. You don't go silent. You stay connected. He thought about that. Can I learn? She looked at him. 7 years old. A black eye that was 18 months in the past and had not reappeared. Straightening daily, taking up more space, asking questions about everything. Standing at a chain-link fence having just watched her put down 4 armed men and calmly asking if he could learn. Yes, she said. But not yet. You're still in the foundation phase. What's the foundation phase? Balance, body awareness, knowing how to fall without getting hurt. She paused. You've been doing that for 6 months. So the next part starts soon. When I say so. He accepted this without argument, which was one of his better qualities. He had no ego about it, no impatience. He was building towards something and he understood that the building had to happen in order, and he trusted her read on when the order was right. She didn't know how he'd arrived at that trust so completely and so early, but it was there and she was careful with it. The next part started 3 weeks later. She taught him to fall first, proper falls, rolling falls, the kind that took impact and redirected it instead of absorbing it straight through bone and joint. He picked it up in a day and a half. She taught him basic footwork, weight transfer, how to move in a way that was always balanced and never committed until commitment was the right call. He picked that up in a week and started applying it unconsciously, which was the sign that it had gone from learning to understanding. She taught him how to throw a punch correctly and he landed it on the target pad with a crack that made her reconsider everything she thought she knew about a 7-year-old's upper body strength. She looked at her hand. Looked at him. Again, she said. He hit it again. Exact same placement, exact same power, no adjustment needed. You've been practicing, she said. In my head, he said. I run it in my head when I can't sleep. All the movements you showed me. She stared at him. Then she repositioned the pad. Show me a left hook. He showed her a left hook. Oliver, who was allegedly doing stretches in the corner of the training room and was in fact watching all of this, said nothing for approximately a minute and then said, Dinah. I know, she said. He's 7. I know. That was not the hook of a 7-year-old. I know, Ollie. Harry looked between them. Is that bad? It's the opposite of bad, Dinah said. It means we adjust the curriculum. She looked at him levelly. You understand that what I'm teaching you is not for starting things. I know, he said, with a simplicity that was not boredom or repetition but genuine understanding. It's for ending things when they need to end. She had not taught him that formulation. She had no idea where he'd gotten it. It was exactly right. Yes, she said. Oliver made a sound that might have been a laugh swallowed poorly. The training deepened. Dinah was careful, always careful about pace, always watching for the line between building confidence and building recklessness, but Harry made careful difficult because he absorbed everything she gave him and came back the next day asking for more and the day after that demonstrating that the previous thing had already become automatic. She found herself constructing new challenges daily. She reached back through her own training, through her years with the League of Assassins that she did not talk about and the years before that with her mother, the original Black Canary, who had been the hardest teacher she'd ever had and the most important, and she passed it all through a filter of what was appropriate for a child and what Harry was specifically ready for, which were 2 different calculations and she ran them both every single day. The magic complicated everything in the best possible way. It didn't interfere with training, it layered onto it, because Harry was beginning to learn that his magic was related to his emotional and physical state the same way breath was related to exertion. When he was calm and focused, the magic was precise, things moved cleanly, the air pressure in the room changed in ways you felt in your sinuses, and his physical performance went up by a visible margin. When he was agitated, the magic scattered. Lights flickered. The mat rippled. Once an entire section of the wall padding detached itself and drifted slowly toward the ceiling. Let's add breath work to the training, Dinah said, watching the wall padding float. Yeah. Harry said, not looking at the floating padding because he was maintaining eye contact with the target in front of him, which she found admirable. The kind that controls output. Military breathing. You already know the basics, we're going to get more precise. He nodded. He was not fazed by any of this, not the magic, not the training, not the escalating complexity of what she was asking him to do. She had been careful never to make his magic a source of anxiety, and it had worked. He carried it the way he carried his physical training, as a capability he was developing, something that had standards and could be refined. Dinah, he said, still looking at the target. Yeah. Can you do the canary cry? Like now? So I can hear it? She looked at him. Where did you hear that term? Oliver, he said immediately. She made a mental note to have a word with Oliver. Then she looked at Harry, who was 7, who had a clean room and books on every surface and a second Spinosaurus and who slept without flinching and who was, she had come to understand, made of something rarer than anything she'd encountered in her years of extraordinary encounters, and she stepped back and she let it out. Not full power. A fraction of full power, in a controlled direction, a short burst aimed at the target pad, but even a fraction of the canary cry was not a small thing. The sound hit the pad and the pad hit the wall shuddered visibly, and the pitch of it was the pitch that was specifically engineered to bypass the rational brain and speak directly to the nervous system, and every loose item in the room moved 2 inches in the same direction at once. Harry didn't flinch. His eyes went enormous, with delight, not fear. That was yours, he said. That came from you. Yes. Can I? He stopped. Started again. Do you think I could? I think you might be capable of things we haven't found yet, she said. But slowly. Foundation first. He made a face that was not quite impatience and not quite acceptance. You always say that. Because it's always true. Oliver appeared in the doorway with 3 glasses of juice. He handed them out and looked at the displaced wall padding and the small scorch on the target pad and the general sense of controlled destruction that hung in the room. Good session, he said. He's going to be terrifying, Dinah said. Harry drank his juice. That's the plan, he said. Oliver choked slightly. Harry looked up at him with innocent green eyes. What? He said. Nothing, Oliver said. Absolutely nothing. The legal process moved with the bureaucratic speed of all important things, which was to say glacially and then all at once. Margaret came back in month 7 with the kind of paperwork that meant something was solidifying. She came again in month 9. The home assessments were thorough and a little invasive and Dinah passed all of them with the manner of a woman who had faced things considerably more challenging than a social worker with a clipboard, which was true, and Oliver passed them while also being considerably more charming than strictly necessary, which was also true of him in most situations. In month 11, Margaret sat across from Dinah at the kitchen table while Harry was at school. They'd enrolled him in a local primary where he was currently 4 grade levels ahead in reading and 2 in mathematics and had made exactly one friend, a girl named Priya who shared his interest in prehistoric animals and matched his reading pace, which Dinah felt was the best possible kind of friend, and put a document on the table. This isn't the final order, Margaret said. That comes in 6 to 8 weeks, if everything continues as it has. But this is she found the right word. The declaration. That this placement is the recommendation. That you are the recommended permanent guardian. Dinah looked at the document. She was not a person who was overwhelmed by paperwork. She had signed extradition documents and field warrants and things that had directly determined the outcomes of armed conflicts. She was not moved by paper. She read the line, recommended permanent guardian for Harold James Potter, Dilby July 31st, and had to look away for a moment. He's been mine since the alley, she said. Her voice was even. Yes, said Margaret. But now it says so on paper, too. She told Harry that evening. She told him in the kitchen while he was doing homework at the table. He did homework with a focused efficiency that was somewhat undermining the myth of homework as a burden, and she sat across from him and said, the paperwork came through today. The important kind. It means this is your home. Official. He looked up from his notebook. He set down his pencil in the fold of the book, carefully, the way he did when a conversation required his full attention. Always, he said. Always. He looked at her for a moment. His face was doing the processing thing, that still, rapid, internal thing, and then it resolved into something she'd been watching him grow toward for 11 months. Something easy and open and undefended. Okay, he said. He picked up his pencil. Then he put it down again. Can I call you Mum? She had not expected that. She had thought about it, in that distant, careful, middle-of-the-night way she thought about things she wanted very much and wasn't sure she had the right to, but she hadn't expected him to ask first. He had always been the one who held back until he was sure. He must, she thought, be sure. Yes, she said. Absolutely yes. He nodded, very seriously. Picked up his pencil. Okay, he said. Mum. He tried the word out, not emotionally, just practically, testing the shape of it. Then, satisfied, can you help me with this long division? I understand the theory but the remainders are annoying. She laughed. She couldn't help it, it came out of her in a way that was more surprise than humor, this helpless, warm, genuine laugh. Yeah, she said. Move over. Oliver found out about both pieces of news at the same time, the official paperwork and the name, because Harry told him the moment he came through the door that evening, standing in the hallway with his socks on and his book under his arm, the paperwork came through. And I'm calling Dinah Mum now. Oliver stood in the doorway with his jacket half off. He looked at Harry. He looked at Dinah in the kitchen. He looked back at Harry. That's two very big things, he said. Yes, Harry agreed. Also there's pasta. Dinah made it. Right. Oliver finished taking his jacket off. He hung it on the hook with the particular deliberateness of someone managing their face. Then he crouched down to Harry's level. That's brilliant, he said, and his voice was rougher than usual in a way Harry probably didn't read but Dinah absolutely did. Both of those things. Harry looked at him for a moment. Oliver, he said. Yeah, mate. You're here all the time, Harry said, in his matter-of-fact way. You live here. You buy me dinosaurs and you taught me chess and you tell Mum when she's being too strict about bedtime. He paused. I know you're her partner. But is there a word? For what you are to me? Oliver was quiet for a moment. The roughness in his voice when he spoke was definitely not managed. There's a few options, he said. What do you feel like? Harry considered with his usual gravity. Uncle Ollie, he offered. Then, immediately, that might be weird. It's not weird, Oliver said. No. It's good. Uncle Ollie is very good. Okay. Harry nodded, the matter settled. Pasta's nearly ready, Uncle Ollie. Oliver stood up. He looked at Dinah. His eyes were doing the thing they sometimes did where they said everything he wasn't saying, which was a lot. She raised an eyebrow at him. He cleared his throat. Right, he said. Pasta. Good. They ate pasta. Harry told them about a project at school involving the water cycle and his opinions about it, which were detailed and slightly critical of the textbook's oversimplification. Oliver agreed that the textbook sounded reductive. Dinah made tea. The night settled over the flat. Harry went to bed. Oliver washed the dishes because he and Dinah had a system, she cooked, he cleaned, and this had evolved from practicality into something that felt like a language. She sat at the counter and drank her tea and watched him. Dinah, he said, back to her, running the tap. Yeah. I'd like to be on the paperwork. At some point. A beat. If it makes sense. Down the line. I'm not asking for anything else, I'm just saying, as far as Harry goes, I'd like to be, Ollie. I know it's complicated and you don't have to, Oliver. She waited until he looked at her. I'll talk to Margaret Monday. He turned back to the dishes. His shoulders did something. Okay, he said. And it's not complicated. It's a little complicated. Not really, she said. It's just true. He was quiet for a moment. The sound of the water. The warm light. Yeah, he said. Okay. Yeah. She drank her tea. Outside the window, the city was doing what London always did at 11 at night, running and glittering and being absolutely indifferent to the small, essential, irreversible things happening in the lit windows above it. The following year was the one where Harry became, in the full sense, himself. It was partly the training. By 8, he was operating at a level that required Dinah to genuinely strategize about their sparring sessions, to not hold back as much as she'd been holding back, to bring real speed and make him find answers in real time rather than in response to slowed demonstration. He was terrifyingly quick. His footwork had become something that was less like a child's training footwork and more like an instinct, the kind of physical awareness that usually took adults years to develop because adults had already learned to be in their heads about movement. The magic had grown into its own kind of training. Dinah had started doing research, careful, thorough, the same way she researched anything she needed to understand in order to do her job, and she'd found, through channels that became progressively stranger as she followed the thread, that there were others like Harry. Not exactly like Harry, but people for whom magic was a fact rather than an anomaly. She hadn't yet found the structures around it, the school, the ministry, the whole architecture of a parallel world that was apparently running alongside the mundane one, but she was building a picture, piece by piece, and she was going to understand it fully before it came anywhere near her son. Because that was what he was. Her son. She had arrived at that word the same way she arrived at all important truths, not by deciding it but by discovering that it had already been true for some time. Harry had started to experiment with his magic more deliberately. He'd discovered he could do things beyond telekinesis. He could change the temperature in a room when he concentrated, warm or cool the air around him. He could make light, a clean white gold kind, that came from no source but his hands and didn't burn. He could, once, in a session where he was extremely focused, become briefly invisible, not all of him, just his hands, which disappeared for about 15 seconds and then came back, and Harry stared at where they'd been with an expression of philosophical interest. That's new, he said. How did it feel? Dinah asked. Like holding your breath but with your skin, he said. She wrote it down. She kept a notebook, a plain, unlabeled notebook that lived in the back of her underwear drawer where no one would be interested in it, in which she documented everything. Every new ability, every pattern, every correlation with his emotional or physical state. She was building a map of something she didn't fully understand yet, and building the map was the right first step. She also trained him in the cry. Not the cry itself, she had no idea if he was capable of that, and she wasn't going to push in that direction yet. But she trained him in the voice, the breath behind it, the diaphragmatic power that made the cry possible. She was a vocal fighter, she'd always understood that sound was a weapon, and Harry took to it with the same alarming facility he took to everything she gave him. He developed a shout, by 8.5, that was not the canary cry but was in the same family as the canary cry, the same kind of directed, resonant force, coming from somewhere deeper than the throat. It cracked a window in the training room during a session where he pushed too hard. Oliver came in from the next room. He looked at the cracked window. He looked at Harry, who was looking at the window with his philosophical expression. Do I want to know? Oliver said. Probably not, Dinah said. Was anyone hurt? No. Is the window load-bearing? It's a window, Ollie. Right. He went back to the other room. Harry looked at the window. I can fix it, he said. I've fixed things before. The mug I dropped last week, I know. But let me get a glazier. It's more efficient if I, Harry. She looked at him. Not everything needs to be solved the fast way. He thought about this for a moment. Then, is that a lesson about something else? She smiled. Everything is a lesson about something else. He made a face at her that was approximately 70% fondness and 30% exasperation, which was the face he'd been developing since month 3 and which she treasured. The school situation was becoming complicated. His primary school had been good teachers, the friendship with Priya, a general environment of benign normalcy that had been genuinely valuable after his first years. But he was outpacing it. By 9, he was reading at secondary level and doing mathematics that his teacher had admitted, with a mixture of pride and bewilderment, went beyond her own comfortable expertise. Dinah had supplemented with tutors, but Harry absorbed tutors in 3 sessions and then asked for more advanced tutors, and the whole thing was becoming recursive. "We need to think about secondary options," Dinah told Oliver one night. They were sitting at the kitchen table with the laptop between them, looking at school websites. "Not yet, but the planning has to start now. There's that school in Edinburgh," Oliver said. "The one your Argus contact mentioned." He made a gesture that meant children with particular capabilities. "I don't want him at an Argus-adjacent institution," Dinah said flatly. "Fair." Oliver scrolled. "What about the international system? Geneva, maybe?" He needs to be here." She said it before she'd fully thought it through and then sat with it and found it was true. This is home. He needs to be in it long enough that it's bone deep. The world will try to take him out of it soon enough. Oliver looked at her. "You know something. I've been researching." She pulled up a different window on the laptop, her notes, the notebook, the thread she'd been following. "There's a wizarding world, Ollie. A whole parallel structure. Schools, government, economy, culture. Running alongside ours and deliberately separate from it." Oliver stared at the screen. "For how long?" "Centuries, probably. Maybe longer." She leaned back. "And Harry is significant to them. I don't have the full picture yet. But I know that his parents were part of it, that they were killed by something in it, and that whatever killed them wanted Harry specifically." Oliver was quiet for a long moment. "And you think they'll come for him?" "I think they'll come for him and they'll think they have the right to," she said. "And I need to have a complete understanding of that world before they do, because I am not sending my son into a situation I haven't mapped." "No," Oliver said. "Obviously not." A pause. "How close are you to a complete picture?" "Closer than I was." "Not close enough." He looked at her. "What do you need?" She told him. He spent the next month pulling strings through channels that Oliver Queen had and Dinah Lance did not, and by the end of it they had a picture that was, if not complete, at least structural. The Wizarding World. Hogwarts. The Ministry of Magic. The prophecy, she'd gotten the shape of that from a source she'd had to work hard to get to, and she'd sat with it for 3 days before she could look at it without her chest constricting. Neither can live while the other survives. She looked at Harry at breakfast on the 4th day. He was 10 now, reading a book about migratory bird patterns with a cup of tea he'd started drinking at 9, having decided with characteristic deliberateness that he preferred it to juice, and she thought about the prophecy and what she was going to do about it. She was going to make him ready, she'd decided. That was what she was going to do. She was going to make him so thoroughly, so completely, so irrevocably ready that when the prophecy came for him, it found something it hadn't factored in. It had been written about a child with no mother. No one who would burn the world to get to him and arrive before the fire did. It hadn't accounted for her. "Mum," Harry said, not looking up from his book. "Yeah. Did you know that Arctic terns fly from pole to pole every year? The whole distance. Both ways." "I did not know that." 70,000 kilometers, he said. He looked up. His eyes were the same impossible green they'd always been, bright in the morning light. "Why do you think they do it?" "Because they can," she said. And because the thing at the other end is worth it. He considered this, bird brain to canary. That makes sense, he said, and went back to his book. Oliver came in from a run, earbuds in, and went straight to the coffee maker. Harry said, without looking up, Uncle Ollie, did you know Arctic terns fly 70,000 kilometers a year? Sounds exhausting, Oliver said. Mum says they do it because they can. Oliver looked at Dinah. She looked back at him. Your mother, Oliver said, pouring his coffee, is usually right about things. I know, Harry said comfortably. She drank her tea. The morning was bright and the flat was warm and her son was reading about migratory birds and somewhere in a wizarding world she was systematically mapping, a prophecy was waiting with the patience of things that have nowhere to be. She was going to be ready first. The last significant thing that happened before Harry turned 11 was the incident at the museum, which was not a crisis but which clarified several things that needed clarifying. They'd gone back for Harry's birthday, 10th, he'd asked for the museum and lunch at the cafe, no party, which Dinah had accepted and Oliver had overridden by inviting Priya and her parents and 2 other children from Harry's class, because Oliver had decided that Harry was going to have a real birthday celebration if it killed him, and Harry had been surprised and then transparently pleased, which was exactly what Oliver had been gambling on. A man had followed them from the tube station to the museum. Dinah had clocked him at the station and watched him through the museum at a distance, assessing. Middling height, forgettable clothes, carrying a bag that was wrong, too light for its size, the way bags were wrong when they contained equipment rather than contents. He watched Harry specifically. Not the group. Harry. She'd let it go 15 minutes before she peeled off from the birthday group, Oliver had it, the children were absorbed in a display about ocean creatures, and found the man in a corridor near the bathrooms. He was not surprised to be found. She clocked that immediately, he'd been waiting for her, which meant he'd seen her clocking him, which meant he was either incompetent or deliberately making contact through this particular method. You're following my son, she said. Her voice was conversational and friendly and had absolutely nothing underneath it that was either conversational or friendly. The man looked at her with the expression of someone who had been briefed on her but found the real version somewhat exceeding the brief. Ms. Lance. My name is Elphias Doge. I represent certain interests in the wizarding world. I was sent to observe, you were sent to observe my son without my knowledge or permission, she said. On his birthday. There are interests here that supersede, there are not, she said. The friendliness dropped entirely. Her voice had the quality it got in the field, the one that told people the next 30 seconds were genuinely consequential. You are going to give me the name of who sent you and you are going to tell them this, Harry is mine, he is cared for, he is well, and the next person sent to observe him without coming to me directly first will find the experience significantly more unpleasant than this conversation. Are we clear? Doge looked at her. He was clearly a man of the wizarding world, she could feel the slight wrongness of him, the way magic users had a specific quality to their presence, like a frequency just below hearing, and he was also clearly a man who had just recalibrated his understanding of what he was dealing with. I'll pass the message, he said. Thank you. She stepped back. Enjoy the museum, Mr. Doge. Don't follow us again. She went back to Harry's birthday. Oliver raised an eyebrow at her from across the ocean display where Harry and Priya were arguing, with great enthusiasm, about whether giant squid could theoretically fight off a sperm whale. She made a small gesture, later. He nodded. Harry, for his part, had no idea. He argued about giant squid and ate birthday cake and received a book about mythological creatures from Priya that he opened immediately and began reading at the table, and Oliver had to tell him twice to put it down to talk to the humans present, which Harry did with visible effort and good grace. He was extraordinary. She found herself thinking it in those direct terms with increasing frequency, not as a mother's bias but as a professional assessment. The child she'd found in an alley had become something that she could only describe as a force of nature in a body that was still figuring out how tall it was going to be. He had her stubbornness and Oliver's strategic patience. He had warmth that was entirely his own, genuine and unguarded, the warmth of someone who had been more actions request aborted. Write the next chapter now. Chapter 3, The Letter Comes. The owl arrived on a Tuesday. Harry was in the middle of a training session, the real kind, the full-speed kind that Dinah had graduated him to at 10.5 after a sparring session where he'd anticipated 3 of her moves in sequence and countered all of them, and she'd decided that going slower than her actual speed was no longer useful to either of them. He was quick enough now that she had to think. She found she liked that. She found it terrifying in the way she found most things about him terrifying, not because of what he was but because of what the world was going to do when it fully understood what he was. They were working on combination sequences. Long chains, strike, redirect, transition, ground control, back to standing, the kind of fluid continuous movement that separated fighters who had learned techniques from fighters who had absorbed them. Harry was running a 12-step combination that she'd introduced 4 days ago and already executing at 90%, which meant she was going to have to write a new one tonight. The owl hit the window. Not lightly. It hit with the particular conviction of magical post, which apparently had no concept of waiting for a convenient moment. A large tawny owl, carrying a thick cream envelope sealed in dark red wax, hitting the training room window at 11 in the morning with a sound like a thrown book. Harry stopped mid-combination. They both looked at the window. The owl looked back with the attitude of something that had a job and was not interested in delays. "That's for me," Harry said. "How do you know?" "Because it's been looking at me specifically for the last 30 seconds. He paused. "I thought I was imagining it. It followed us from the park yesterday." Dinah looked at the owl. The owl looked at Harry. She opened the window. The owl came in with zero hesitation, landed on Harry's forearm with the grip of something accustomed to being an official messenger, and extended its leg with the letter attached. Harry untied it. The owl ruffled its feathers once, accepted a strip of dried chicken from the training room's wall hook where Dinah had started keeping snacks for the 2 magical owls that had begun appearing with increasing frequency in the last 6 months. She'd been expecting this, had been tracking the escalating observational interest from the wizarding world since the Doge incident at the museum, and had stocked the snacks with her usual practical preparation for the inevitable, and then departed. Through the still open window with the efficiency of something that had 12 other deliveries. Harry turned the letter over. The wax seal was elaborate, a coat of arms she recognized from her research. Hogwarts. He read the front. His face went through something complicated and quick, surprise, recognition, a flash of something she couldn't immediately name, and then went to the carefully controlled neutral that he'd developed as his default when processing things that mattered a lot. Mr. H. Potter, the training room, 2nd floor, Canary Wharf. "They know exactly where we are," he said. "They've known for a while," Dinah said. "I've known they've known." "Open it." He broke the seal and read it standing up, still in his training clothes, his breathing still slightly elevated from the session. She watched his face. He read it twice, she could tell because his eyes went back to the top, and then he lowered it and looked at her. "You already know about this," he said. Not an accusation. Just Harry reading the room with his usual accuracy. "Yes." "How long?" "About a year." "Most of a year." He absorbed this. "What else do you know?" She could have softened it. She could have parceled it out strategically. She looked at her son, 11 years old, trained to the edge of what his body could currently do, magic that cracked windows and moved water and occasionally made the room temperature drop by 10 degrees when he was concentrating, and decided that he had never once in his life benefited from being managed. "Sit down," she said. "We're done training for today." They sat on the mat. She told him everything. The wizarding world. Hogwarts. His parents, James and Lily Potter, who had been brilliant and brave and who had died for him, specifically for him, in a way that had sent a shockwave through both worlds and left him alive in the wreckage. The prophecy she did not recite word for word but described in its shape, that he and Voldemort were bound to face each other, had been bound since before his birth. The mark on his forehead, which he knew about, which he'd had since the night his parents died, which was not just a scar but a remnant of something that had tried to kill him and failed. She told him about the magical world's assumption that he belonged to them. That he was theirs, the boy who lived, the chosen one, a symbol they had been investing with meaning for 10 years without once asking him what he thought about it. Harry listened to all of it. He sat cross-legged on the training mat with his hands in his lap, and he listened with the focused stillness he brought to anything that required his full attention, and when she was done he was quiet for a long moment. "I knew some of it," he said. "The scar part. And I knew my parents were, that they were in something bigger than just, I knew it wasn't just a car crash." Dinah had told him early that his parents hadn't died in a car crash. She'd told him they'd been killed by someone and that someone had also tried to kill him and failed, and Harry, at 7, had said why, and she'd said because you are significant and some people are afraid of significant things, and he'd thought about it and said, "Are you afraid of significant things?" and she'd said no, and he'd said okay, and that had apparently been sufficient. "The prophecy," he said now. "Yeah. Does it bother you?" "Yes." She didn't hesitate. "The idea that something decided your future before you were born bothers me a great deal. The idea that people have been using it to make decisions about your life without your input for 10 years bothers me more." He nodded slowly. "But you've been preparing me for it. I've been preparing you so that you have choices inside it. So that whatever happens, you're the one making decisions, not the prophecy." She held his gaze. "You are not a symbol. You are not the property of a world you've never seen. You are a person, and you are my son, and any path you walk, you're going to walk it fully informed and completely capable. That's all I've been doing." He looked at the letter in his hands. Then at her. "Can I go?" he said. "To Hogwarts? Do you want to?" "Yes." No hesitation. "I've been reading everything you brought home for 8 months, Mom. I want to see it." A pause. "And I want to learn what they can teach me that we haven't found yet." "We're going to have some conversations first," she said. "Before you go anywhere. With the people who wrote that letter." "Okay." He looked back at the letter. "It says to disregard it if we haven't responded after 2 more owls. Let them send the owls. I'll arrange the meeting my way." He smiled, the full one, not the careful one. The one that was entirely him. "You're going to be very scary about this." "I'm going to be very clear about this," she said. "There's a difference." "Not really," he said, still smiling. She was. She wrote to Minerva McGonagall, not by owl, but through a channel her research had uncovered, a point of contact between the mundane and wizarding worlds that existed for exactly this kind of administrative necessity. She wrote with the precision she brought to any professional communication where she needed to establish both the terms and the power dynamics in the opening sentence. "Professor McGonagall. My name is Dinah Lance. I am the legal guardian of Harry Potter. I understand Hogwarts wishes to offer Harry a place. I am willing to discuss this. I am not willing to have this discussion at anyone else's convenience or in anyone else's location. I will meet with you and relevant parties at a place of my choosing on a date of my choosing. I am available from next Monday. Please confirm by return." McGonagall's response arrived within the day. It was crisp, formal, faintly surprised, and agreed to all terms without argument. Dinah showed Oliver the exchange. He read it. "She said yes pretty fast," he said. "She's a smart woman." She recognized the tone. "What tone is that?" "The one that means the alternative to yes is more complicated than yes." Oliver set the letter down. "Okay," he said. "Are we doing this as civilians or, as Harry's parents?" she said. "That's what we are." He was quiet for a moment. Then he straightened up and cracked his knuckles and got the particular expression he had before a negotiation that mattered. "Right," he said. "Let me get a suit." McGonagall came to the flat. That was Dinah's choice, home ground, Harry's space, somewhere that said this is what his life looks like before anyone opened their mouth. She'd made tea and there were biscuits on the table and Harry's books were visible on the shelves, his training shoes by the door, the Spinosaurus on the windowsill where it had lived for 4 years. McGonagall arrived in a tartan coat that was Muggle in its composition but very slightly not Muggle in the way it sat, and with the bearing of a woman who had been formidable for so long it had become structural, the way mountains were structural. She was in her late 60s, grey-haired, sharp-eyed, the kind of face that had seen everything twice and maintained its opinion of all of it. She took in the flat with one precise visual sweep and then she looked at Harry. Her face did something. Just briefly, just at the eyes, a flash of something that was too specific to be surprise. Recognition, maybe, but deeper than recognition. The particular expression of someone seeing a ghost they've been expecting. "Mr. Potter," she said. "Hi," Harry said. He stood up from the couch and put his hand out. McGonagall looked at the outstretched hand and shook it. "I'm Harry. This is my mum, Dinah Lance, and my Uncle Oliver. Professor Minerva McGonagall," she said. "Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry." "I know," Harry said pleasantly. "I've been researching. Please sit down." Oliver made a sound into his teacup. McGonagall looked at Harry for a moment with an expression that was recalibrating, and then she sat. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Dinah ran it with a directness that she could feel McGonagall respecting even as the older woman occasionally pushed back, not defensively, but with the testing quality of someone assessing what they were dealing with. They covered the curriculum, the safety protocols, the specific and non-negotiable point that Harry's guardianship was legal, total, and not subject to revision by any external body including the Ministry of Magic. They covered the prophecy. Dinah raised it directly, watched McGonagall not quite hide her reaction to that, and said, flatly, "I know about it. Harry knows about it. We've discussed it. It is not going to be used as a management tool." "Albus," McGonagall began. "Dumbledore," Dinah said, "has not met Harry or spoken with me. He does not currently have standing to make decisions about my son's life. That standing is mine. If he'd like to discuss Harry's situation, he can do so with me, as a partner in Harry's welfare, not as the architect of it." She paused. "I'd like to meet him before Harry starts school." "He will want to meet Harry," McGonagall said carefully. "He can want whatever he likes. I'm telling you what I require." She let that sit. "Is that a problem?" McGonagall looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind her eyes, a decision being made. "No," she said. "I'll arrange it." She left with, Dinah felt, a modified understanding of what she'd walked into. She also left Harry's acceptance confirmed, the supply list delivered, and, this was the thing Dinah had been watching for, a genuine warmth she hadn't hidden completely when Harry had asked her questions about Hogwarts. Real questions, specific questions, the kind that told McGonagall he'd actually done the reading. The woman had answered them with increasing animation, and by the end she'd been talking to him directly and there had been a quality to it that Dinah recognized, the quality of a teacher who has found a student worth the full force of their attention. Good. She wanted Harry to have that. She wanted it from people who deserved to give it. "She's brilliant," Harry said, after McGonagall left. "Yes," Dinah agreed. "Dumbledore will be harder," Harry said. "What makes you say that?" "Because she looks at me and sees me. He'll look at me and see the prophecy." He paused, considering. "I've read about him too. He's been managing this situation for 10 years. People who've been managing things for 10 years don't like it when the thing manages back." "Oliver, from the kitchen, you're 11. "I know," Harry said, not at all defensively. "Is that relevant?" Oliver appeared in the kitchen doorway. He looked at Harry. He looked at Dinah. "He's going to be fine," he said. "Isn't he?" "He's going to be more than fine," she said. Dumbledore came 2 days before the Diagon Alley trip. He came with Minerva McGonagall and what appeared to be an air of benevolent authority so long established and so completely assumed that Dinah suspected he was barely aware of it anymore, the way you stopped noticing a coat you'd worn for 30 years. He was tall and silver-haired and his eyes were the particular shade of blue that was meant to suggest wisdom and warmth and probably did, to most people. He had half-moon spectacles and robes that were technically muggle-coated but carried the same slight wrongness as Doja's clothing, the signature of a man who had translated himself rather than inhabited the world. He sat down and looked at Harry and Dinah saw the thing Harry had predicted happen in real time. His eyes found Harry's scar first, lingered a half-second, and then found Harry's eyes with the adjustment of someone reordering priorities they'd been holding for a decade. Harry looked back at him with the polite, direct, completely unintimidated gaze he used on everyone. "Harry," Dumbledore said, and his voice was warm and measured in a way that was practiced without being false. "It is remarkable to finally meet you." "You too, sir," Harry said. "I've read quite a lot about you." "Have you indeed?" Dumbledore smiled. "And what did you find?" "That you're brilliant and that you've been running a long game for a very long time," Harry said, pleasantly. "And that you care about people but you're willing to use them if you think the outcome is important enough." He paused. "I found that last part more interesting than the first two." McGonagall had gone very still in the way people went still when a child said something so accurate it required a moment of processing. Dumbledore's smile held, but the quality of it shifted, thinned slightly at the edges, recalibrated. "That is a very direct assessment," he said. "Mum taught me that direct is usually faster." Dumbledore looked at Dinah. "Ms. Lance." "Professor Dumbledore," she said. "Let's talk about what you think the next several years look like and then I'll tell you what they actually look like, and we can find the overlap." They were there for 3 hours. The conversation was the most interesting negotiation Dinah had conducted in a decade, not because it was contentious, but because Dumbledore was genuinely brilliant and she was genuinely brilliant and neither of them was willing to pretend to agree with anything they didn't actually agree with, which meant every point was worked out in full and nothing was left at a comfortable approximation. They agreed on some things. Hogwarts was the right place for Harry's magical education. The other students, the community, the specific texture of the wizarding world, Harry needed those things and they couldn't be replicated. The prophecy was real and its implications had to be taken seriously. They disagreed on others. Dumbledore believed, with the gentle certainty of a man whose long game had survived every challenge so far, that Harry needed to understand sacrifice, that the shape of the prophecy implied a particular resolution, one that required Harry to be willing. Dinah listened to this. She listened to all of it, gave it the genuine consideration she gave everything, and then she said, very quietly, "No." Dumbledore looked at her. "My son is not a sacrifice," she said. "He is a person. If there is a way through what's coming that costs him his life, that is the last option, not the planned one, and I will tear apart every alternative first. If you've been building toward a resolution that requires Harry to die, I need you to start over." A pause. "I'm not saying this to be obstructive. I'm saying it because it's the truth and because he deserves someone who says it." A long silence. McGonagall was looking at her hands. Dumbledore was looking at Dinah with an expression that had moved past recalibration into something more complex, something that was, she thought, genuinely re-examining. "You love him very much," he said finally. "Yes," she said. "And you love the world very much. And those two things are going to have to coexist, because neither of us is going away." She held his gaze. "He'll go to Hogwarts. He'll be the best student you've ever seen, because he's already remarkable and we've been working. I will cooperate with you in every area where your interests and Harry's interests align. In every area where they don't, I'll be here." Another pause. Then Dumbledore said, "I believe you will," and the quality of it was not quite what it might have been in someone else. It wasn't resignation. It was, she thought, something more like respect. The kind that a man who had fought alone for decades perhaps hadn't expected to find. He left. McGonagall lingered for a moment at the door. "He's not a bad man," she said quietly. "I know," Dinah said. "That's not the same as being right." McGonagall left without answering, but her expression said she'd heard it and filed it somewhere she'd be taking it out again later. Harry, who had been extraordinary throughout, composed, direct, funny at exactly the right moments, never once trying to perform or impress or manage Dumbledore's feelings about him, waited until the door closed and then sat down on the couch and blew out a long breath. "That was a lot," he said. "Yes. He really does think I might have to die. He thinks it might be necessary," she said. "He's wrong. And now he knows someone else is working the problem." Harry was quiet for a moment. "I'm not afraid of it," he said. "Just so you know. If it came to that, I'm not afraid." "I know," she said. "But being not afraid and it being the answer are two different things." He nodded. "Then, can we go to Diagon Alley now? I want to see it. I've been waiting." "Day after tomorrow," she said. He made a face. 2 days, she said. "Fine," he said. "I'm going to finish my book." He picked up his book, a very dense volume on advanced magical theory she'd acquired through a contact in the wizarding world, well above the Hogwarts first-year level, and one that Harry was 3/4 through, and was absorbed in 10 seconds. Oliver, who had been sitting in the corner throughout the entire Dumbledore meeting with the specific silence of someone who is paying attention to everything while appearing to pay attention to nothing, said, "That went well." "It went the way it needed to go," she said. "Same thing." He stood up. "I'm getting us dinner. Real dinner. Not training food. We've earned it." Diagon Alley was, in its way, one of the most extraordinary things Dinah had seen in a life that had contained a substantial number of extraordinary things. They went on a Thursday morning, Harry, and Oliver, entering through the leaky cauldron, which was exactly as atmospheric and slightly chaotic as her research had suggested. The barman Tom looked at Harry, started, recovered, and gave them directions to the courtyard with the combination of mundane pleasantness and barely suppressed recognition that Dinah suspected Harry was going to be dealing with a great deal. Harry tapped the bricks with Oliver's borrowed wand. They needed to get him his own, that was the first stop, and the wall opened and Diagon Alley unfolded in front of them. Harry stopped walking for about 3 seconds. Just stopped, absolutely still, and looked. She could see what it was to him. This was his other world, the one he'd been reading about for months, and here it was in color, 3-dimensional, moving. Shops with window displays that moved. Owls in stacked cages outside an emporium, looking imperious. Broomsticks in a sports shop window. A cauldron merchant. The sound and smell of it, old wood and something herbal and something else that didn't have a mundane equivalent, the underpinning scent of active magic, the frequency she'd been learning to recognize. "Okay," Harry said, softly. "Not to anyone. Just acknowledging it." "Yeah," Oliver said. "They did Gringotts first." Dinah had done her research here too. She understood that Harry had a vault, understood roughly what it contained, understood that Gringotts operated by rules that were not the Ministry's rules and which she had a grudging professional respect for. The goblins were extraordinary. She found them immediately impressive in the way she found anyone impressive who was very good at their specific job and didn't particularly care what you thought about that, and the lead goblin, Griphook, handled Harry's first visit with an efficient courtesy that was clearly given to the account, not the person, which Dinah thought was probably the cleanest possible relationship with a bank. Harry greeted Griphook with the directness he used on everyone. "I've never been here before. I don't know what's in my vault. Can you give me the full account balance and a summary of any associated holdings?" Griphook looked at him. Then at Dinah. "The Guardian has the right to request account information," he said. "She does," Harry agreed. "But so do I, don't I? As the account holder." A beat. Griphook's expression didn't change but something in it shifted. "You are technically correct," he said. "I try to be," Harry said pleasantly. Oliver was looking at the ceiling. The full account statement was substantial. Harry looked at it on the cart ride down and his face was very still, and she watched him absorb the information with a seriousness that didn't perform wealth or distress about it, just absorbed it as a fact that now needed to be incorporated into his model of his situation. "My parents left this," he said. "Yes. I'd like to understand where it came from. The history of it." "Not today," he said quickly. "But eventually. We'll find out," she said. "Together." He nodded and pocketed the statement and looked straight ahead. The wand was the best part of the day. Ollivander's was narrow and dim and smelled of sawdust and something else, that underpinning magical frequency stronger in here than anywhere else on the alley. Ollivander himself appeared from between shelves with a suddenness that was theatrical and probably deliberate, and looked at Harry with the quality of a man encountering a problem he'd been expecting and finding it more interesting in person. "I wondered when I'd be seeing you, Mr. Potter," he said. "I assumed you would be," Harry said. Ollivander blinked. "Indeed. Well. Let's find yours." He started pulling boxes. The first 3 wands, nothing, a slight twitch, and one that sent a spray of sparks into a shelf and knocked 2 boxes to the floor, and then the 4th, holly and phoenix feather, 11 inches, nice and supple, and Harry lifted it and the warmth that moved through the room was immediate and unmistakable, a wave of it, air pressure changing, the temperature warming by 5 degrees, and every wand box in the shop rattled once on its shelf, very softly, like an answer. Harry looked at the wand. The wand sat in his hand with the comfort of something arriving at its correct location. Light gathered at the tip without him doing anything, just the contact, just the recognition. Ollivander was staring at it. "Curious," he said. "Very curious." "What is?" Harry said. "The phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand, he only ever gave 2 feathers. One is in your wand. The other," he paused, clearly choosing words. "The other gave power to the wand that gave you that scar." Harry looked at the wand. Then at Ollivander. "We're going to have an interesting relationship, then," he said, to the wand. "Let's both be better than the last one." Ollivander made a sound that was not quite a laugh. Dinah bought the wand and the spare holly wand care kit and they left. The rest of the alley was a revelation of increments. Madame Malkin's, where Harry stood for robes fitting with the patience he brought to anything necessary, and the slight additional alertness of someone noting that 2 of the other students being fitted were watching him with the specific recognition she'd been watching for. He nodded to one of them, a pale, pointed boy who looked at Harry with an assessing curiosity, and the boy nodded back and said nothing, and Harry filed him away, she could tell, in whatever internal classification system he maintained. Books at flourish and blots, where Harry picked up his required texts and then stood in the advanced section for 10 minutes until Dinah said they needed to move, and he turned around with 4 additional books he hadn't put down. "You've already read 2 of those," she said. "I want my own copies," he said. She bought them. Oliver got a butterbeer from a shop at the end of the alley while Harry stood outside a broom shop looking at the display with the focused assessment of someone who hadn't ridden a broom yet but had read extensively about the aerodynamics involved. "Do you want one?" Oliver said, appearing beside him with 2 butterbeers. "Not today," Harry said. "But in a year I'll want the best available." "That's planning ahead," Oliver said. "Mum says that's important." "Mum is correct." Oliver handed him a butterbeer. Harry took it, tried it, made an expression that was the purest form of approval his face made. Oliver laughed. Dinah stood at the end of the alley and watched her son and her Oliver, whatever category he occupied that was always and exactly right, standing outside a broom shop in a magical alley drinking butterbeer in the late summer light, and let herself feel it fully. The world was going to complicate this. The prophecy was going to complicate this. Voldemort and Dumbledore's long game and the wizarding world's idea of who her son was, all of it was going to complicate this. She let herself feel it anyway. The warmth of it. The absolute rock-solid, load-bearing truth of it. Then Harry turned and found her with his eyes across the crowd, the way he always did in any space, locating her first, then settling, and raised his butterbeer toward her, and she raised her hand back. "Mum," he called. "They have a Nimbus 2000 in the window. The new model." "I see it," she called back. "I'm not asking for it," he said, very clearly. "I'm just noting it." "I know," she said. "I'm noting that you're noting it." Oliver turned and found her too, that same motion, and his expression was warm and plain and completely unguarded in the way it was when he thought she wasn't looking directly at him, and she was always looking directly at him. The summer continued. School supplies were packed. The list was completed. Dinah had added things not on the list: emergency medical supplies, a compact communications device she'd had modified by a tech contact to function in magically saturated environments, a small notebook in a charmed cover she'd sourced from a wizarding contact that would encrypt anything written in it. Harry had accepted all of these additions without argument and with the faint approving expression of someone whose operational preparation instincts were being correctly catered to. The night before the 1st of September, he was quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet. He'd been quiet all evening: dinner, dishes, Oliver's chess attempt that Harry had declined for once. She found him in his room at 10 at night, sitting on his bed with the Spinosaurus on the windowsill and his new wand on the covers beside him and his school trunk at the foot of the bed, and he was just sitting. "Talk," she said, sitting beside him. A long pause. "I've been reading," he said. "About what it was like. After my parents died. The wizarding world, they were celebrating in the streets. Children my age were named after me. There are books about me. Books about a version of me that's been made up, essentially. Nobody knew me but they wrote books about me." She let him talk. "And I'm going there tomorrow. And all of them have this version of me in their heads. And when they see me it'll be, the gap between what they think I am and what I actually am is going to be a problem." He paused. "Not for me. I know who I am. But it's going to be strange." "Yes," she agreed. "It will be. How do I handle it?" She thought about it. "Be yourself so completely and so immediately that there's no room for the other version," she said. "Don't explain yourself. Don't apologize for not being what they expected. Just be. The rest catches up or it doesn't." He picked up the wand. Turned it over in his hands. "Are you scared?" he said. "About me going?" She was quiet for a moment. Honest was the only option. "Yes," she said. "Not of Hogwarts and not of what you can handle. Scared in the way you're scared when something you love moves further into the world. That's what this is." "I'll be home for Christmas," he said. "You better be." He leaned against her, just briefly, his shoulder into her arm, the way he did when he was being 7 and 30 simultaneously, which was most of the time. She put her arm around him and they sat like that for a minute, the city outside his window and the wand in his lap and everything about to change. "Mum," he said. "Yeah. Thank you. For the alley." She tightened her arm. "Best night's work I ever did," she said. He made a sound that was the laugh he made when something was both funny and true and he wasn't quite ready to say which was more. Then he straightened up. "Okay," he said. "I should sleep." "You should." He got into bed. She pulled the covers up the way she'd been doing for 4 years and stood at the door and he was already reaching for his wand on the covers, turning it over in his hands in the dark, at ease with it. "Harry." "Yeah. Be magnificent," she said. "But be safe." "Can't I be both?" "That is the assignment," she said. The light under the door of his room went out. She stood in the hallway with her back against the wall and her eyes on the ceiling and tomorrow pulling at the edges of everything, and let herself be here, just now, in the hallway, with her son on the other side of the door and the wand in his hand and the whole wide terrifying brilliant world waiting. Then she went and found Oliver, who was sitting in the kitchen not quite reading, and sat beside him, and he put his arm around her without being asked, and they stayed there in the warm quiet until it was time to go. Chapter 4, Platform 9 3/4. The platform was chaos of the best kind. Steam and noise and the smell of something coal-tinged and old, families moving in every direction, owls complaining from their cages, cats weaving between legs, the occasional flash of robes too warm for the end of August. The Hogwarts Express was red and enormous and entirely certain of itself, sitting at the platform like something that had been here before trains were invented and would be here long after. Harry stood in the middle of it with his trunk on a trolley, and Hedwig, he'd named her 3 days after acquiring her, having spent those 3 days in genuine consideration, and the name had landed with the same finality as all his decisions, sitting on the trunk's edge looking imperious. He was in jeans and his dark jacket, and he was looking at all of it the way he'd looked at Diagon Alley. That same still, full attention absorption. Taking the measure of it. Dinah stood beside him. Oliver was on his other side with his hands in his pockets, doing the thing he did in crowds where he looked relaxed and was in fact clocking every exit and every face, a habit neither of them could turn off. "It's real," Harry said. "It's real," she agreed. "The book said the engine was built in 1937. That's not a metaphor for anything. They literally have a train from 1937. The wizarding world has a specific relationship with technology," she said. "They decided the train worked and left it there," he said. Not critically, with genuine appreciation, the appreciation of someone who understood that some things worked and didn't need improving. He looked at her. "I'm going to get on it." "I know. And you're going to stand here. That is how platforms work, yes." He looked at her for another second. Looked at Oliver. Oliver said, "You've got everything. Wands in the inside pocket. Notebooks in the trunk lid. The communication device is in the hidden pocket Mum sewed into the trunk lining," Harry said. "I know. I helped pack." "Right." Oliver cleared his throat. "You're going to be brilliant." "I know," Harry said. Not arrogantly, just matter-of-factly, the way he knew all true things. Oliver laughed. Then he pulled Harry in for a hug, the kind where his arm went over Harry's shoulder and his hand gripped the back of Harry's neck briefly, the most Oliver form of affection, compressed and genuine, and Harry leaned into it for exactly as long as it required and then stepped back. Then he turned to Dinah. She looked at her son. 11 years old, standing on platform 9 3/4 with a trunk and an owl and a wand and 5 years of training and a brain that had not stopped going since she'd found him in an alley, and her chest was doing the thing it had been doing since last night, the vast and slightly terrifying warmth, and she had made a decision at approximately 3 in the morning that she was going to be completely honest about all of it instead of compressing it into something more manageable. "Come here," she said. He walked into the hug and she held on for a moment, properly, the way she'd been holding on since month 2 when he'd started allowing it, and she'd understood that allowing it had been a conscious decision he'd made about trust, and she had never taken it lightly since. She felt him hold on back. His arms were stronger than they'd been at 6, solid with training, but he held on with the same quality he'd had since the beginning, complete. She let go. Stepped back. Looked at him. "Anything happens, you send Hedwig," she said. "Anything at all." "I know. And the device works through magical interference, I tested it." "I know. And McGonagall has my contact information." "Mum." His voice was fond and steady. "I know." She made herself nod. Made herself step back the second step. "Okay," she said. "Go." He picked up Hedwig's cage and took the trolley handle and walked toward the train. He turned once, at the door, and she was watching and he knew she was watching, and he raised his hand, not a wave, just a raised hand, acknowledgement and promise in the same gesture, and then he was on the train and gone. She stood there. Oliver put his hand on her shoulder. "He's extraordinary," he said. "I know." Her voice was completely even. "And you trained him into the ground." I know. And he'll probably reorganize the entire school structure within 6 weeks. She laughed. She couldn't help it, it came out of her in the way his laughs always came, surprise first and then real. 6 weeks might be generous, she said. Oliver squeezed her shoulder. Kebab, he said. God, yes. They left the platform. She did not look back. She was a woman who understood that looking back when you'd already made the right decision was not sentimentality, it was self-punishment, and she didn't do that to herself. She looked back once, at the gate. The train was still there, steam rising. She thought she saw a flash of movement at one of the windows, a hand, maybe, a green jacket, and then the crowd shifted and there was just the steam and the noise and the city beyond it. She turned and walked out with Oliver and didn't look back again. On the train, Harry found a compartment. He chose the one at the end of the corridor with a deliberateness that was not snobbery but strategy. End compartments had one shared wall instead of two, which meant fewer points of entry and better acoustic privacy, and he'd learned to prefer rooms that could be controlled. He loaded Hedwig's cage onto the rack in his trunk below the seat and settled in with a book he'd already read because rereads were sometimes better than new reads for thinking inside, and let the train fill around him. He was aware of the looking. He'd expected it, had been expecting it since his conversation with Dinah the night before, the gap between the myth and the actual, and it was almost exactly as strange as he'd anticipated. Students walking past the compartment window with a double take, then a stare, then the specific murmuring quality of people who have confirmed something. He didn't mind the looking. He minded the lowered voices. The lowered voices implied a version of him that existed only at a remove, never directly. He turned a page. Let them look. The red-headed boy arrived about 15 minutes in. He knocked on the compartment door, which was more than most people had done, simply sliding it open without asking, and stuck his head in. He was freckled and lanky and had the slightly uncertain energy of someone who was nervous but trying not to perform nervousness because he'd decided performing it was worse. Is it all right if I sit here? Everywhere else is full. Harry looked at him. The claim was not verifiable, the train was full but not overflowing, but the manner was genuine. Go ahead, he said. The boy sat. Put a rat in his lap. The rat appeared to be asleep. I'm Ron, the boy said. Ron Weasley. Harry. Ron's eyes went immediately to Harry's forehead, where the fringe of his hair covered the scar but not entirely, and then back up with the guilt quickness of someone who'd been trained to know that staring was impolite and hadn't quite succeeded in the not staring part. Right, he said. I know. I mean, everyone knows. Is that, sorry. My mum said not to make it weird. It's a bit weird regardless, Harry said pleasantly. That's fine. Ron seemed to relax slightly at that, the acknowledgement that the awkwardness was a fact rather than a failure. I've got 6 brothers, he said. And a sister. Bill, Charlie, Percy, Fred and George, twins, me, and Ginny. We've all been at Hogwarts except Ginny, she's not old enough yet. He paused, clearly aware he was talking a lot. Sorry. When I'm nervous it's fine, Harry said. What house do you think you'll be in? Gryffindor, Ron said immediately. All of us have been. Well, Mum and Dad too. It'd be really something if I wasn't. He looked at Harry with a curiosity that was genuine rather than performative. What about you? Do you know how it works? The sorting? I've read about it, Harry said. What do you think you'll be? Harry considered. Probably Gryffindor, he said. Though the hat will have opinions. What makes you say that? Because I've been trained by someone who charges toward things rather than around them, Harry said, and I think that's become structural. Ron processed this for a moment. Then, is that good? Usually, Harry said. The compartment door opened again, not a knock this time, a slide, the door moving with the confidence of someone who had decided they were entering, and a girl put her head in. She was brown-skinned and dark-haired and had the specific bright quality of someone whose brain was moving faster than her social presentation could fully contain. She was carrying an enormous book and her school robes were already on, which was either very organized or very anxious, and Harry wasn't sure yet which. "Has anyone seen a toad?" "Neville's lost his." "Oh," she said, seeing Harry. Her expression went through several things quickly: recognition, conscious decision to treat the recognition as irrelevant, focus returning to original mission. "You're Harry Potter. Have you seen a toad?" "No toad," Harry said. "What does Neville's look like?" "Like a toad," she said, slightly impatiently. "Helpful," he said. She paused. Reconsidered. "Brown, quite fat, answers to Trevor." "I haven't seen it. If I do, I'll find you." He looked at her. "What's your name?" "Hermione Granger." She said it with the small defensive lift that people used for names they'd had to defend before. "I'm Muggle-born." "Okay," Harry said. She blinked. Clearly that had not been the response she'd prepared for. "I've read all the books for first year," she said. "And several second and third year texts." "So have I," Harry said. She stared at him. "Really?" "I've been preparing since last year," he said. "Sit down if you want. We're not doing anything important." She looked at the seat. Looked at Ron, who gave her a small shrug. Looked at Harry. Then she came in and sat down, and the compartment became, immediately and irrevocably, different in the way places became different when the right people arrived in them. They talked for 2 hours. It started as a general conversation about Hogwarts and became, in the specific way of conversations between people who are all operating at the high end of something, a genuine intellectual exchange that was also, and Harry noticed this, catalogued it with the same interest he catalogued everything useful, fun. Hermione had opinions about everything and the research to back them, and very little patience for conclusions that couldn't be supported. Ron had an intuitive grasp of strategy and a self-deprecating humor that masked a sharper mind than he was currently advertising. At one point Hermione said, "The theory of wand channeling in first-year curriculum is quite limiting, actually. The standard model assumes a linear relationship between concentration and output, but advanced texts suggest it's more like," and Harry finished her sentence, the exact same words, and they both stopped and looked at each other, and Hermione said, "You read Vindictus Viridian," and Harry said, "and Adalbert Waffling," and something clicked between them, not socially, not emotionally, but intellectually, the click of two systems finding a compatible interface, and she leaned forward in her seat and said, "What did you think of his theory of?" Ron looked between them. "This is going to be the year," he said, to no one in particular. "What year?" Harry said. "The year I feel like the least smart person in the room a lot," Ron said, but he was grinning. "Fred and George said it would happen." "I thought they meant because of Percy." Harry looked at him. "Strategy," he said. "You think in moves. That's not the same as book knowledge, but it's not lesser." Ron blinked. "How do you know I think in moves?" "You've been rearranging the pieces on that travel chess set in your bag since we started talking," Harry said. "You're not playing a game. You're working out a problem." Ron looked down at the travel chess set he'd, apparently unconsciously, gotten out and been moving. His ears went slightly pink. "Habit," he said. "Good habit," Harry said. They found Neville's toad. It had gone 2 compartments down and was sitting on a first-year girl's knee being petted with great satisfaction, and Harry returned it through the window, which Hermione pointed out he hadn't needed to do because it would have been found eventually, and Harry pointed out that eventually was longer than necessary, and Ron said that was very decisive of him, and the 3 of them walked back to their compartment in a formation that felt, after 2 hours, like it had always existed. The sorting was not what the other students expected. The Great Hall was everything Harry had read about and then more, because books, he was finding, systematically underestimated the sensory reality of the wizarding world. The ceiling was the sky, not a metaphor for the sky. The candles were not decoration. The tables were not symbolic. Everything was exactly what it said it was, turned up to the setting above the one he'd been imagining. He stood with the first years and watched the hat sing and noted the structural information it delivered, the 4 houses, their qualities, the competitive history between them, and filed it all and was ready. His name was called third. The hall went the way he'd predicted, a murmur that built quickly, the specific frequency of mass recognition, eyes finding him from every table. He walked to the stool and sat down and picked up the hat and put it on his own head without waiting for the professor to do it. The hat said, in his ear, in a voice that was both external and entirely internal at once, like thinking in someone else's voice, "Well, that's unusual. Is it?" Harry said, not aloud. "Most first years are more manageable. You've got quite a lot going on." "I know," Harry said. Let's see. Brave, certainly, exceptional physical capability, trained rather than natural, which is interesting. Smart, very smart, the kind that seeks, not just receives. Loyal in the specific way. Not broadly, not to institutions. To people you've chosen. A pause. And something else. Something large. You're aware of it. Yes, Harry said. It would be easy to say Slytherin. You have the strategic mind for it. You have the, what's the word, the capability for distance when you need it. Distance and coldness aren't the same thing, Harry said. No, the hat agreed, and it sounded, faintly, amused. They're not. All right. I know where you go. I knew when you sat down, honestly. I was enjoying the conversation. Thank you, Harry said. Don't thank me yet, the hat said. The work is yours. And then, aloud, ringing out into the great hall, Gryffindor. The Gryffindor table exploded. He walked to it with the same pace he'd walked up with, unhurried, present, and sat down, and the people around him were immediately making noise, all of it positive, and he responded to it with the warmth that was his own genuine quality, the one Dinah had let grow rather than shaping it in any direction, and it was real and they could feel it was real, which made it land differently than performance would have. Hermione was sorted into Gryffindor 14 minutes later. She sat down across from him looking both vindicated and slightly surprised to be vindicated. The hat considered Ravenclaw, she said. I know, Harry said. I could tell from over here. How? Your face was doing the processing thing it does when something is being evaluated. She looked at him. That's very observant. I notice things, he said simply. Ron landed in Gryffindor 2 minutes after Hermione, with the slightly shaky relief of someone whose major concern has been resolved. He dropped into the seat next to Harry and let out a long breath, and Harry handed him a bread roll without commenting on the relief, which was, Ron's expression said, exactly right. The feast was extraordinary. Harry ate with the same focused appreciation he'd brought to every good meal since the first night in Dinah's flat, the quality of someone who understood that food was not a given, and he talked and listened in roughly equal proportion, and by the end of the meal had a working map of several social dynamics at the table that he found interesting and 3 people who had made him laugh genuinely, which was his private measure of a good evening. The classes started the next morning and began the process of confirming what he'd suspected. He was going to have to work at the pace of the curriculum while running a parallel self-education at a significantly higher level, because the curriculum was not built for someone who'd been doing serious preparation for a year. Charms was good. Flitwick was delightful, a tiny man with enormous enthusiasm, who taught with the energy of someone who had never stopped finding magic wondrous, and whose structural knowledge was excellent. Harry performed the first charm of the year on the first try, cleanly, and then spent the rest of the class helping Ron, who had the right instinct but was fighting his wand rather than working with it. Stop pushing, Harry told him. Your wand isn't resistant. It's just not being met. Match your concentration to its frequency, sort of. Like tuning something. Ron tried it. The feather rose. Ron's face split into a grin. How did you know that? I had to figure out the same thing, Harry said. My magic and my wand took about a week to find each other properly. Flitwick, who had been observing, made a note on his clipboard with an expression of considerable interest. Transfiguration was McGonagall, who turned her desk into a pig and back before they'd sat down, and then looked at the class with the expression of a woman who had done this for decades and found it no less effective for that. Her teaching was clean and precise and demanding, and Harry found it immediately satisfying. She expected real understanding, not performance of understanding, and responded to the difference. She also, he noticed, watched him with a slight additional attention that was not favoritism but assessment. She was building a picture of him. He was comfortable with that. She called on him in the second class with a question about the theory of matter transformation, a question that was several levels above first-year curriculum, he recognized, and understood was directed at him specifically. He answered it fully, and then added a point about the limitation she'd implied but not stated, and her expression did the thing it had done at the flat, that flash of genuine response quickly contained in professionalism. Correct, Mr. Potter, she said. The limitation you've identified is addressed in third-year theory. You might find Chapter 12 of Emmerich Switch's advanced text interesting. I've read it, he said. I thought his resolution of the limitation was elegant but incomplete. The class was very quiet. McGonagall looked at him for a moment. Stay after class, she said. He stayed. She told him she was going to arrange supplementary work with a seventh-year prefect who could operate at his level. She told him this without making it about exceptionalism, pragmatically, like adjusting a training schedule. He appreciated that. Defense against the dark arts was strange. Professor Quirrell had the quality Harry had learned to notice in certain people, the quality of someone wearing themselves like a costume, every gesture slightly overchosen, every reaction a half-beat delayed. Not nervous, he thought. Something else. He filed it without deciding on it. He watched. Quirrell's teaching was technically adequate and emotionally absent, which was the worst combination for defense work. Harry sat through the first class absorbing the curriculum baseline and watching Quirrell's hands when he thought no one was looking. The hands were still when the face was performing nervousness. That was the tell. Nervous people's hands shook. Performing nervousness, you forgot about the hands. You're watching him, Hermione said, walking out of the class. Yes, Harry said. Why? Something's off, Harry said. I'm not sure what yet. She was quiet for a moment. I didn't notice anything. You were watching the board, he said. You absorb information from the front of the room. I absorb information from the whole room. She considered this. That's a different skill set, she said, not defensively, analytically. Yes. Yours is useful for learning. Mine is useful for other things. What other things? Knowing when a room isn't what it says it is, he said. We should probably combine both. She looked at him for a moment. Recalibrating, he'd come to recognize, she did it quickly and the result usually landed in agreement even when she didn't want to agree. Fine, she said. Yes. Combined. Ron caught up with them at the stairs. Quirrell seems a bit, I don't know. Weird. Harry thinks something's off, Hermione said. Yeah. Ron nodded. Me too. The stammer's wrong. My brother Charlie stammers when he's tired or upset. His stammer moves. Quirrell's stammer is the same every time. It's like a recording. Harry stopped walking. Looked at Ron. That's exactly right, he said. It's the same every time. Ron blinked. Oh. Is that important? Possibly very important, Harry said. Let's not decide what it means yet. Let's keep watching. The week settled into a rhythm. Mornings were classes, afternoons were more classes, evenings were homework and the library and the conversations that happened naturally in the Gryffindor common room between people who spent a great deal of time in close proximity. Harry did his homework efficiently and thoroughly and spent the remaining time in self-directed study that was operating several levels above his year group, which he kept mostly quiet not because he was hiding it but because the common room wasn't the right venue for advanced magical theory. He and Hermione had taken to using a corner of the library that was technically open to all years but that no one much used because it was adjacent to the restricted section and had the slight ambient tension of forbidden things nearby. They worked in comfortable parallel, Hermione on research questions with the thoroughness of someone who wasn't satisfied until she'd found every relevant source, Harry on theoretical problems that he mapped in his small notebook in a shorthand that was partly written and partly diagrammatic and which Hermione had once looked at and said, "This is like mathematical notation but for magic." "I invented it," Harry said. "It was easier to think in." She'd stared at him for about 3 seconds. Then, "Can you teach me?" He taught her. She improved on it within a week, which he found excellent. Quidditch became the unexpected third thing. He'd known he would fly, and he'd known, from Dinah's research into Hogwarts Quidditch records, which she'd obtained through McGonagall with the thoroughness she applied to anything affecting Harry's life, that his father had been a chaser of considerable ability. He hadn't known what flying would actually feel like until the first-year broom lesson and the moment the broom rose to his hand. It rose immediately. Without command, without coaxing, his hand went out and the broom was there, like the wand in Ollivander's, like all the things that had recognized something in him before he'd had to explain himself to them. He felt the magic in it meeting the magic in him, the same frequency, same family. He flew. Not a hover, not a cautious first attempt. He went up and then went horizontal and the speed of it was the closest thing he'd found to the feeling he got in training with Dinah when everything was going right and every movement was connected and time felt different, the good different, the present completely in your body different. He came back down because the lesson required it. He was aware that everyone on the ground was looking at him and he didn't particularly care. Madame Hooch was looking at him with a specific expression. He recognized it, he'd seen it on Dinah's face in training, the expression of someone who has just seen something they didn't fully expect and are rapidly revising their plans. She pulled him aside after the lesson. "I'm going to speak to Professor McGonagall," she said. "About the Quidditch team," he said. "First years don't normally," "I know," he said. "I understand if that's the rule." She looked at him. "It is the rule," she said. "But rules have provisions for exceptional circumstances." A pause. "That was remarkable flying, Mr. Potter." "It felt right," he said. Which was the honest answer and the only one he had. He was on the team within the week. Seeker, because Seekers needed the thing flying had given him, the awareness of the whole field at once, the peripheral vision trained by years of Dinah telling him you never look where the attack is coming from, you look where it could come from, and because catching a snitch was, structurally, very similar to the tracking exercises she'd run with him in his 5th year, and he was, as he'd told Ron, ahead of the curriculum. Ron was ecstatic about the Quidditch appointment in the way Ron was ecstatic about things that mattered to him, loudly and with a complete absence of self-consciousness about the loudness. He had turned out to be the best possible roommate for Harry's personality, he matched Harry's frankness, found Harry's particular variety of directness funny rather than abrasive, and had an instinctive loyalty that he didn't perform or announce but that was simply present, constant, load-bearing. "The team hasn't won the cup in ages," Ron told him. "You're going to fix that." "I'm one player," Harry said. "You're you," Ron said, as if that resolved the argument, which it did, actually. Hermione had opinions about Quidditch that were primarily structural. "The rules are irrational," she said. "The Seeker can effectively override the entire game by catching the snitch at the wrong time. It's a design flaw." "It's a design feature," Harry said. "It puts the whole game on one player's decision. The Seeker has to know when to catch it and when to wait. It's not about speed. It's about timing." She paused. "That's actually a more sophisticated reading of the rules than I had." "You were approaching it as a fairness problem," he said. "It's a strategy problem." She made the face she made when she was annoyed at being wrong and satisfied at having been corrected correctly. It was one of his favorite of her faces. Fine, she said. The quarrel situation sharpened over weeks in ways he didn't discuss with anyone yet except in the broadest terms. He'd gone back to the structural observations, the stammer, the hands, the faint quality of wrongness that he associated with magical concealment, a frequency just below the right one, like something hiding behind something else. He'd done research in the library and found what he was looking for not in the dark arts section but in the history section, the break-in at Gringotts. The vault that had been emptied the same day he and Dinah and Oliver had been in Diagon Alley. He wrote to Dinah. The letter came back in 2 days, Hedwig's personal fastest time, which Harry was fairly sure was not a coincidence, and it said, in Dinah's handwriting, which was precise and slightly angular, the handwriting of someone who wrote fast and clearly, I know about the break-in. I've been looking at it. Don't go near Quirrell alone. Don't go near whatever they moved. Write me everything you observe, and I mean everything, no editing for what you think is relevant. Let me build the full picture. You are not obliged to solve this yourself, you are 11 and you have professors whose literal job is to handle this. Go to McGonagall if it becomes urgent. I love you. Train in the mornings, I know you've been skipping. He had been skipping morning training because of Quidditch practice. He wrote back, the Quidditch practice is training. Love you too. I haven't gone near Quirrell. He's gone near me though, he looked at my scar in the corridor 3 times now. I don't think he knows I noticed. Her response, he absolutely knows you noticed. Be careful. He wrote the observations. All of them, unedited, in the encrypted notebook, and transferred them to letters that Hedwig carried with the reliability of something that understood her job mattered. The correspondence became, over weeks, the other shape of his education, Dinah asking questions from outside the castle that forced him to look at things from angles he hadn't covered, her field intelligence reading combining with his direct observation in ways that built a picture neither of them had alone. Oliver wrote 2, shorter letters, usually containing chess problems, once containing a small flat package that turned out to be a folded London Street map with in case you need reminding what home looks like written in the margin, which Harry put in the inside of his trunk lid where he could see it from his bed. The first Quidditch match was on a Saturday in November that was cold enough to see breath. He changed in the locker room with the team and the team captain, Oliver Wood, no relation, which Ron found extremely funny, gave a pre-match speech that was emotionally elevated and technically detailed and Harry found genuinely useful for the last 30 seconds when it arrived at actual strategic information. He flew out with the team and the noise of the crowd hit him the way noise always hit him in large spaces, he filtered it, found the useful frequencies, let the rest pass through. He could see from the air the way he could never quite see from the ground, the whole shape of everything visible at once, and the cold was sharp and clean and the broom was certain under him and he was exactly here, exactly present, the feeling he lived for in training. He found the snitch at 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Not because he was faster than the Slytherin Seeker, though he was. Because he'd been watching the Seeker's eyes rather than the Seeker's movement, and the moment the Seeker's eyes went still, the way Ron's hands went still on the chess pieces when he'd found the move, Harry went for it. The snitch was in his fist before the Slytherin Seeker had cleared his starting formation. The crowd sound was different from high up, it arrived a beat delayed, the way thunder follows lightning. He heard it, spread his arms slightly for balance, and looked at the snitch opening and closing in his hand, this small golden furious thing that had been impossible for 4 minutes and was now just, his. He landed. The team was noise and motion around him. Ron was in the stands making a sound that probably violated certain acoustic norms. Hermione was clapping with the controlled enthusiasm of someone who had decided to allow herself enthusiasm but was still managing its expression. Wood grabbed his arm. 4 minutes, he said. That's a record. I know, Harry said. I read the records. Wood stared at him. You read the Quidditch records. I read everything about the things I'm going to do, Harry said. It seemed relevant. Wood turned to the rest of the team and said, with the expression of someone encountering a late gift, he read the records. The team found this either impressive or alarming. Harry didn't particularly mind which. That evening in the common room, over a celebratory something that was mostly noise and Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, Ron said, "You knew when you were going to catch it." "Yes," Harry said. "Before you went for it." The seeker's eyes went still. "That's the tell. When you see the piece you want, really see it, your eyes stop moving and your body hasn't started yet. There's a gap." I watched for the gap. Ron was quiet for a moment. "You're doing to Quidditch what I do to chess," he said. "Yes," Harry said. "Which is why you'd be a good seeker if the circumstances were different." Ron blinked. "I'd be terrible. I'm not fast enough." "You don't need to be the fastest. You need to read faster than the fastest." Harry ate at every flavor bean that turned out to be earwax. He filed it without changing expression. "The speed is irrelevant if you're already at the destination." Ron looked at him for a long moment. Then he looked at Hermione. "Is he always like this?" "Yes," Hermione said. "You get used to it. It's mostly useful." "Mostly," Harry agreed. Hermione looked at him over her book. "The Quirrell situation," she said. "I've been thinking." "I know. I saw you thinking." "The Philosopher's Stone," she said, keeping her voice low. "I know about it, I researched it after you mentioned the break-in. There are protections on the 3rd floor. I think what was moved from Gringotts is behind them." "Yes," Harry said. She stared at him. "You already knew." "I suspected." "You've confirmed it." "How?" "Fluffy," he said. "The 3-headed dog. I went to look at the door in September. The lock on it has been redone recently, newer bolts, different key marks. It's not just locked. Something's been added." "You went to look at the door," Hermione said, at a volume that was not a whisper. "Quietly," he said. "I didn't open it." She looked like she was deciding between several responses. "And you think Quirrell is connected?" "Quirrell is more than connected," Harry said. "There's something wrong with Quirrell in a way that goes past personality. I'm writing to my mum about it." Oh." She paused. She knew about Dinah, he'd mentioned her in general terms, parents on the train, "She's my mum, she's where I got most of this from," but he hadn't detailed it. "She knows about the wizarding world." "She knows about everything," he said simply. "She'll have seen things we can't see from here. We keep watching Quirrell. We don't go near the stone. We tell McGonagall if something changes." Ron said, "And if something changes fast?" "Like, too fast to get McGonagall." Harry looked at him. "Then we handle it," he said. "But that's the last resort, not the plan." Ron nodded. Hermione made the face that meant she agreed with the logic and was reserving the right to be anxious about the implications. Harry ate another every flavor bean, which turned out to be vomit, and his face did nothing. "How do you do that?" Ron said. "Do what?" "Not react." "I ate an earwax one 3 minutes ago," Harry said. "The vomit one is better by comparison. Context matters." Ron started laughing. Hermione gave up on the face and laughed too. In the firelight of the Gryffindor common room, with the castle around them and London somewhere beyond the distance and the snitch still sitting in Harry's pocket because he'd meant to hand it to Wood and hadn't gotten around to it, the 3 of them laughed. And outside the frost was settling on the castle grounds and Quirrell was in his office with his turban and his hands that didn't shake and something ancient and terrible was waiting at the back of everything for the right moment. Harry noted all of it. He filed it. He looked at his 2 friends in the warm light. He would write to Dinah tomorrow and tell her everything, the stone, the confirmation, Quirrell's eyes, all of it. She would read it in London and write back something precise and useful and there would be a chess problem from Oliver in the same envelope. He reached into his pocket and felt the snitch move against his fingers, a tiny restless motion, still trying. He let it try. He'd catch it again when he needed to. Chapter 5, The Stone and the Storm. The letter arrived on a Monday. Not from Dinah, from Hagrid, or rather, through Hagrid, because Hagrid had apparently acquired a dragon egg from a stranger in a pub, which was the kind of sentence that told you a great deal about Hagrid in a very short time. Harry had been building a picture of Hagrid since September, large, warm, constitutionally incapable of keeping a secret past the second direct question, deeply loyal, and in possession of a specific kind of goodness that was uncomplicated and therefore extremely valuable. He also had a problem with dangerous animals, which was a character detail that was becoming plot relevant. The dragon was not the point. The dragon was the distraction. Harry figured that out on a Thursday afternoon when Hermione said, from behind an enormous book in their library corner, Hagrid told the stranger how to get past Fluffy. Harry looked up from his notebook. "He told me," she said. He was upset about it. He said the stranger seemed so interested and he'd had too much mead, and he mentioned that Fluffy goes to sleep if you play music. She lowered the book. He was ashamed of it. Which means he knew it mattered. When did the stranger visit him? Harry said. 3 weeks ago. Ron looked up from his chess problem. That's before the dragon egg. The dragon was to get Hagrid in trouble. To get him distracted and out of the way. And to get Dumbledore out of the castle, Harry said. The ministry summons about the dragon, it came the same week. A beat of silence in the library corner that was the silence of 3 people who have arrived at the same conclusion simultaneously and are each checking the other's work. Quirrell's going for it, Ron said. Tonight, possibly, Harry said. Or soon. The path is clear, Dumbledore's gone, Hagrid's compromised, and whoever gave Hagrid the information now knows how to get past the first protection. He was already up, putting his notebook away. We need to go to McGonagall. They went to McGonagall. McGonagall was not in her office. McGonagall was, as the 7th-year prefect they intercepted on the stairs told them with some bewilderment, at a staff meeting called by the deputy headmistress because Dumbledore had been called away and someone needed to hold the administrative structure together. When will she be out? Harry said. The prefect checked his watch. 2 hours, maybe. It's a long meeting. 2 hours. Harry thought about it with the speed he'd developed for field calculations, not rushing, not panicking, running the variables. Quirrell moves tonight. McGonagall's unavailable for 2 hours. Dumbledore is out of the castle. What's behind the 3rd floor door? Has Hagrid's information applied to it now? Write the note, he told Hermione. What note? To McGonagall. Everything. Short, clear, specific. Under her office door. She'll find it when the meeting ends. He looked at Ron. And one to Hedwig for my mum. Same information. That'll take, Hermione began. 12 minutes if we do it fast. That's fine. They did it in 10. Hermione wrote McGonagall's note with the precise clarity of someone who understood that brevity and completeness were not opposites. Harry wrote to Dinah, shorter, faster, his handwriting less neat than usual. Quirrell tonight, going for the stone, path is clear, Dumbledore gone, McGonagall in meeting, note under her door, going to make sure it's handled. I'm not going in alone. I'm going in with Ron and Hermione. We can manage what's in there. I will write you when it's done. Don't come yet, I will write if I need you. He sealed it and gave it to Hedwig through the library window, and Hedwig was in the air before he'd finished the sentence. You said don't come yet, Hermione said. She'll come anyway, Harry said. But telling her first is still the right thing. How long does it take her to get from London? Ron said. She'll figure it out, Harry said, and he meant it as the complete statement it was, she always figured it out. They went to the 3rd floor. The corridor was empty. The door was unlocked, already unlocked, the bolt drawn back, and that confirmed it. Someone had gone in ahead of them. Harry looked at the open door and did the same calculation he did before any entry point in training. What's on the other side, what's the probable configuration, what are the exit options? Fluffy, Ron said. Music, Hermione said. She was already producing a small enchanted music box she'd apparently thought to bring, with the preparation of someone who had been thinking about this longer than tonight. I read about them. Fluffy species, they're incredibly aggressive except when the sound came through the door. Not music they were making. Music already playing, a small harp, just inside the door, enchanted and running and doing its job. Harry opened the door. Fluffy was enormous and asleep. All three heads, breathing in heavy synchronized unison, rumbling the floor slightly with each exhale. The trapdoor beneath its left paw was open. The harp was sitting on Fluffy's back, still playing, beginning to wind down. Harry stepped over Fluffy's tail. Hermione followed, picking her steps with precise care. Ron came last, moving with the careful deliberateness of someone who was genuinely afraid of the enormous three-headed dog and had decided that the fear was rational and he was going to function inside it anyway, which Harry privately thought was a better response to fear than not being afraid would have been. They dropped through the trapdoor. The devil's snare was immediate, dark and grabbing, tendrils finding them before they'd oriented from the drop. Hermione said, "Don't struggle, already calm, already processing," her wand producing a concentrated beam of bright light that she directed systematically. The plant recoiled in clean sections. They were through it in 90 seconds, which Harry suspected was a record. The key room was a large chamber full of moving keys and locked door. Harry looked at the broomsticks. Looked at the door. Looked at the specific pattern of key movement, not random, he realized immediately. Patterned. The right key was moving in a specific sequence that repeated every 40 seconds. He spotted the old, battered one with the bent wing on the first full observation cycle, took a broom, and had it in 32 seconds including the flight up. He handed it to Hermione. "You open the door," he said. "Ron, you're with me on the next one." "There isn't a next one," Ron said. "You got it." "I know. Habit." Harry opened the door. The chess room stopped them. Not Harry and Hermione, the chess board was Ron's, clearly and completely, from the moment he saw it. He stood at the edge of it and the shift was immediate, his shoulders went back, his head tilted, his eyes went through the same process Harry's went through when he was looking at a problem that needed solving. The fear that had been present since the third-floor corridor settled into something useful, something fuel-shaped, and Ron Weasley looked at a giant chess problem and became the most capable person in the room. "You two go ahead," he said. "I'll work through it." "Ron," Hermione began. "I've got it," he said. "I genuinely have it. This is chess." He glanced at Harry. "You said the speed is irrelevant if you're already at the destination." Harry looked at him for a moment. "Then, you've got it," he agreed. "Go," Ron said. They went. The troll was already down, unconscious in the next chamber, knocked out by someone before them, which meant Quirrell had come this way and left a trail. Harry stepped past it and did not slow down. The potion room was Snape's. Hermione solved it in the time it took Harry to confirm that the door behind was not locked and the door ahead was, a deliberate bottleneck, designed to select for logic over strength. He watched her work through the riddle with the efficiency of someone whose entire mental architecture was built for exactly this kind of problem and felt, not for the first time, genuinely grateful that she was here. "The smallest bottle," she said. "4 forward. There's barely enough for one." "One's enough," Harry said. She looked at him. "Harry, I know what's on the other side of that door," he said. "I've known for 2 months. You go back for Ron." He picked up the small bottle. "And if McGonagall gets my note before I'm done, send her through." "What do you mean you've known for 2 months?" she said. "Go back for Ron," he said. "I'm fine." She held his gaze for a moment, reading him the way she'd learned to read him, all the way in, not the surface, and found what was there, not recklessness, not bravado. Certainty. The same quality Dinah's voice had when she said let them come, the quality of someone who has done the preparation and is now simply meeting the situation. Be careful, she said. I'll be thorough, he said. That's better. She hesitated for one more second, then turned back for Ron. Harry drank the potion. He opened the door. The room beyond was large and lit with purple flame that came from no torch and had no warmth. The mirror of Eriste stood against the far wall, which he recognized from his research into the castle. He'd found oblique references to it in a 7th-year text that discussed magical artifacts of concentrated desire. And standing in front of it, one hand reaching toward its surface, was Professor Quirrell. Quirrell turned. The stammer was gone. The nervous energy was gone. The whole performance of the man was gone, and what was underneath it was colder and more direct, and Harry noted this without surprise because he'd been noting the gap between the surface and what was underneath it since September. Harry Potter, Quirrell said. His voice was different, smoother, with something else layered underneath it, a resonance that didn't quite belong to him. I wondered if they'd send you. Nobody sent me, Harry said. He walked into the room at a normal pace and stopped at a comfortable distance, not combat distance, not conversation distance. Assessment distance. He looked at the mirror. Looked at Quirrell. Looked at the mirror again. You can't get it, he said. Not like that. Quirrell's expression flickered. You know about the mirror. I know about most things here, Harry said. What you want is in the mirror, but the mirror only gives it to someone who wants to find it, not use it. That's the protection. He paused. You want to use it. Something moved in Quirrell's face, something that was not quite Quirrell. The resonance in his voice deepened. Show me how to get it, boy, it said, through Quirrell's mouth, and the voice was not Quirrell's voice at all now. It was the other one. The one underneath. Show me and I will make it worth your while. No, Harry said simply. The mirror showed him something when he looked at it, not Voldemort, not the stone, not some future glory. It showed him Dinah and Oliver at the kitchen table, and the London map on the wall behind them, and Harry at 10 reading a book on the couch, a version of him that was peaceful and completely home, and the stone materialized in his pocket in that moment because he wanted to find it and not use it, and he felt the small hard weight of it arrive and kept his face neutral and did not look down. Quirrell moved. He was faster than his performance had suggested, the months of pretending to be weak had obscured an actual capability beneath, and the magical ability was real and substantial, a burst of binding rope that came at Harry with the speed of genuine combat magic. Harry moved. 5 years of Dinah Lance's training was not theory and it was not careful academic practice. It was speed developed past the point where thinking was part of the loop, the kind of reflexes that lived in the body rather than the mind. He was sideways before the rope arrived, and forward by the time it hit the wall, and inside Quirrell's reach before Quirrell had registered the miss. He grabbed Quirrell's wrist. It was like grabbing fire. His hand burned immediately, searing white contact that made his teeth clench, but he held on with the grip Dinah had drilled into him on cold mornings in the training room. Once you commit to the hold you hold, and Quirrell's scream was immediate and genuine and the voice underneath it was something worse than a scream, a shrieking rage that was not quite human in frequency. Quirrell wrenched back. Harry held on. The skin of Quirrell's wrist where Harry's hand was burning was blistering and disintegrating and something that had nothing to do with Quirrell's body was coming apart underneath it, and Harry understood, viscerally, in his hands and in the specific frequency of magic he'd been learning to feel since he was 6 years old in a kitchen with floating cups, that this was the protection his mother had left in him. Not a charm, not a spell. Something older. Love as a physical force, and it was burning through Voldemort like light through mist. Quirrell threw him. The throw was magical. Harry left the ground and covered 12 feet horizontally and hit the floor and rolled, the roll clean and automatic, coming up already. He was up before Quirrell had reassembled his next attack. The stone was still in his pocket. The mirror was behind Quirrell. The door was behind Harry. He did not go for the door. Dinah's voice in his head, not a memory, just the shape of what she'd taught: you don't fight to survive. You fight to finish. He went forward. The next 3 minutes were not elegant. They were not the clean choreography of training. They were the real thing, close and brutal and fast: Quirrell's magic against Harry's physical training and his own emerging power, the room's purple fire going white in sections when they passed through it. Harry took a blasting curse on his left shoulder that would leave a spectacular bruise and kept moving. He took a cutting curse across his right forearm that burned and bled, and he wrapped the hand and kept moving. Quirrell was powerful, but Voldemort was a passenger in a failing host, and the host was burning every time Harry's hands found contact, and Harry's hands found contact because Dinah Lance had drilled him in close-quarters work since he was 7 years old, and Quirrell had never been drilled in anything except deception. It could not last. The moment came the way moments came in training, when you could feel the shift, the point past which the opponent's engine began running on fumes rather than fuel. Quirrell stumbled. Not a feint, not a strategy. His legs simply went unreliable beneath him, and the voice underneath him was screaming without sound, a vibration in the air rather than a noise. Voldemort's fury translated into frequency, and Harry stepped into the stumble and both hands found Quirrell's face. The light was white and total. He didn't see what happened next. He felt it, the burning in his hands, enormous now, the heat going up his arms and his chest, his whole body ringing like a bell struck hard, a sound he was making without meaning to, low and resonant and coming from somewhere deeper than his throat, and Quirrell making a sound that had 2 voices in it, and both voices ending. Then the floor came up and Harry met it, and the purple fire in the room went ordinary orange and then out, and the dark was complete, and somewhere in the dark the mirror reflected nothing, and the stone sat solid and quiet in his pocket, and the castle above him was a building and not a battlefield, and he was 11 years old, and his shoulder hurt and his arm was bleeding and his hands felt like he'd held them in a fire, which was accurate, and he was aware of these things with the calm of a body that had finished what it needed to do and was now simply reporting on the cost. He did not lose consciousness. That was important to him, in the way small precise things were important when everything large had been decided. He did not lose consciousness. He lay on the stone floor in the dark with his cheek against the cold and breathed the way Dinah had taught him, measured, deliberate, in through the nose, the breath that told his body we're still here, we're still working, and waited. He heard the door above the potion room open. He heard footsteps on the stone, not Quirrell's, not the doubled resonance of something possessed. Lighter, quicker, the footsteps of someone who knew where they were going. Harry. McGonagall's voice, from the doorway. Then, coming closer, her robes making a sound on the floor, Harry. I'm here, he said. The floor. Light bloomed from her wand, warm gold, not purple, and he was glad of it. She knelt beside him with the speed of someone half her age, and her hands were very precise on his shoulder, his arm, the burns on his hands, the quick professional assessment. Merlin's beard, she said, very quietly. It's done, he said. Quirrell is, he didn't finish that sentence. Voldemort's gone. He was possessing Quirrell. The touch, my mum's protection, he couldn't, I know what it was, she said, and her voice was doing something he didn't have the angle to read from the floor. Can you sit up? Yes. He sat up. His shoulder screamed. His arm was still bleeding, slowed but not stopped, and she cast something on it that was cool and immediate, and the bleeding stopped. His hands were burned in the specific mapped pattern of 2 palms, fingers, the heel of each hand. Can you walk? He thought about it honestly. Probably not well. That's all right. She cast another charm and he felt a lightening, not his feet leaving the floor but a reduction in how much the floor was insisting on keeping him. A cushioning charm applied to his body rather than a surface. I'm going to get you to the hospital wing. Professor Dumbledore is on his way back. Hermione and Ron, he said. Miss Granger and Mr. Weasley are both fine. Mr. Weasley has a mild concussion from the chess room, he got most of the way through without taking a piece himself, which is frankly extraordinary, and Miss Granger is with him. She helped him to his feet with a grip that was firm and did not allow for argument. Both completely fine. He let her take his weight. They moved through the potion room, the bottles still in their row, Snape's riddle intact, and she helped him up through the chess room where the pieces had gone still, and through the key chamber where the keys floated in aimless patterns without purpose now, and up through the trapdoor where Fluffy was still asleep, and she led him into the corridor with the efficient care of someone who had done this before, who had been doing this for decades, who was very good at it. In the corridor she stopped. "Mr. Potter," she said. "Harry," he said. He'd told her before. A pause. "Harry." She looked at him, really looked, the way she had in the flat that first day, finding Harry instead of finding the legend. Her expression was doing the complicated thing it did when she was resolving a conflict between what she'd been prepared for and what she'd actually encountered. "You should not have been in that room." "I know," he said. "McGonagall's note was under your door." "If the meeting had run shorter, the meeting ran its appropriate length," she said. "I found the note 40 minutes ago." A pause. "I came as quickly as I could." "I know," he said. He met her eyes. "I didn't go in alone. I had Ron and Hermione. And I wrote to my mom before I went in." She looked at him for a long moment. "Your mum," she said, and there was something in it that wasn't quite the official professional McGonagall but the other one, the one who had answered Harry's questions about Hogwarts in the flat with increasing animation. "Yes." She straightened. "Right. Hospital wing." They were halfway there when the castle did something. Not dramatically, not the doors blowing open or the lights going out. It was subtler. A change in the air pressure, the specific quality of it, the frequency that Harry had been learning to feel for years and had gotten very precise about in the last 9 months. Something had entered the castle. Something had entered it quickly and with authority and was currently moving through it in a direction that was going to arrive at their location in approximately. The door at the end of the corridor opened. Dinah came through it at a pace that was not running. She didn't run in situations where running would suggest panic, and she never suggested panic, but was significantly faster than walking. She was in her civilian jacket, jeans, her hair down, which meant she'd come straight from wherever she'd been when Hedwig arrived, no time to change, and the look on her face was the one he'd seen exactly once before, in the Docklands when she'd finished with Kellerman and turned to find him at the fence. That specific quality of complete present tense attention directed at him, everything else in her peripheral. She covered the distance between them in approximately 5 seconds. She looked at his shoulder, his arm, bandaged now from McGonagall's charm, his hands. Her face did nothing he could read from the outside. He knew what was happening on the inside because he knew her. Every injury was being catalogued and assessed and was going to be addressed systematically, and the part that wasn't professional assessment was the part she was currently managing with everything she had. "Mum," he said. She put her hand on the side of his face. Her palm was cool against his cheek and she tilted his head slightly, checking his eyes. Concussion check, she taught him to do this, and then she said, "You're okay." "Yes," he said. "I told you in the letter." "You told me before you went in," she said. "I'm here for the after." "You said you wouldn't come yet." "I said don't come yet," she said. "I didn't promise." She looked at McGonagall over his head. Something passed between them, not warm, not cold, the practical information exchange of two people who both had standing here and were establishing a working relationship in real time. "Hospital wing," McGonagall said. "He's ambulatory, but I can see that." Dinah looked at his hands. The burns were visible even through McGonagall's charm. She took his hands very carefully and turned them palm up and looked at them with the same precise attention she brought to injury assessment in the field. Harry watched her look at his hands. "It doesn't hurt much," he said. "The charm helped." "I know," she said. "Doesn't change what it is." She didn't let go of his hands. She kept them turned palm up in hers, gently, completely gently, and walked with him the rest of the way to the hospital wing, and McGonagall walked on his other side, and the three of them moved through the torchlit corridors in a configuration that was, Harry thought, a pretty accurate diagram of his life, the world he'd been born into on one side, the world that had chosen him on the other, and him walking between them toward the next thing. Hermione was in the hospital wing sitting beside Ron's bed, reading to him from a book he was clearly already bored by but tolerating with the particular patience of someone who has a mild concussion and has been told to stay still. They both looked up when Harry came in. Ron's eyes went to the burns on Harry's hands. His jaw tightened slightly. "Did you get him?" "Yes," Harry said. "Quirrell?" "Gone," Harry said. "Both of them." He sat on the bed that Madame Pomfrey pointed him to with the urgent efficiency of someone who was furious at the state of her patients but was converting the fury into treatment speed. "Ron. The chess, you got through it." Ron's ears went slightly pink. "Mostly," he said. "I had to sacrifice myself at the end. Knight's move. I took the piece that was blocking but the queen got me." "That was the right move," Harry said. "I saw which piece it was from the door." "That was the right call." "Hermione cried," Ron said. "I did not cry," Hermione said. "You made the crying face." "I made the concerned face." "Those are the same face on you," Ron said, and looked at Harry for backup. Harry looked at Hermione. "They are a bit," he said. Hermione closed her book with a sound that was more dignity than irritation. "You both have injuries," she said. "This doesn't seem like the moment." Dinah, who had been standing at the edge of the hospital wing watching the three of them with an expression Harry could read perfectly, relief rendered in the specific form of watching him be himself with people who knew him, the proof of life that mattered most, came forward and sat on the chair next to Harry's bed. Madame Pomfrey descended on him with dressings and potions and the running commentary of a woman who had opinions about the number of 11-year-olds she was treating for combat injuries, which were pointed and valid, and she directed most of them at the ceiling. McGonagall had stepped out. Harry could hear her voice in the corridor, low and rapid, another conversation, someone who had arrived in the castle or had been here. He placed the voice after a moment, "Snape." She was telling Snape. The tone between them was the tone of people who had just had their assumptions revised and were doing the work of revision in real time. Hermione was watching Dinah with the careful, precise attention she brought to new data. "You're the one who trained him," she said. Dinah looked at her. "Yes. The physical capability. The observation. The way he moves." Hermione said it analytically, not accusingly. She was building a model, connecting variables. "That's all training." "Years of it." "Yes," Dinah said again. She looked at Hermione the way she'd looked at Harry in the first weeks, building her own model, assessing, doing it quickly and without broadcasting the assessment. "You're Hermione." "Yes." Hermione glanced at Harry. "He talks about you in his letters." "He talks about you in his letters," Dinah said. "Both of you." She looked at Ron. "How's the head?" "Fine," Ron said, clearly deciding to be fine on principle. "He said you'd come. Even after he said don't come yet. He said you'd come anyway." "He was right," Dinah said simply. "He usually is," Ron said, and there was something in it that was not quite complaint and not quite pride and was, Harry thought, the best possible form of friendship. Dumbledore arrived at 9 o'clock. Harry knew he'd arrived before he came in, felt that same quality he'd felt with Dinah, the change in the castle's air, but different, deeper, the specific frequency of someone the castle recognized at a fundamental level. He came into the hospital wing in robes that were slightly less elaborate than usual, which meant he'd come quickly, and he looked at Harry with an expression that was doing several things simultaneously and managing all of them. Dinah stood up when he came in. Not aggressively, simply standing, the way she stood before any significant conversation. She did not move away from the chair beside Harry's bed. Dumbledore looked at her. Then at Harry. "I understand," he said carefully, to Harry, "that you've had quite an evening." "Yes," Harry said. "And that Professor Quirrell is gone," Harry said. "Both of them." He met Dumbledore's eyes directly. "I found the stone." It's here. He reached into his pocket, the pocket of his robes that Madame Pomfrey had not yet confiscated in favor of hospital clothes, and produced the red stone and held it out. It sat on his bandaged palm, plain and small and enormously consequential. Dumbledore looked at it. Something moved across his face, relief, but more complicated than simple relief. Something that was also, she thought, reassessment. He took the stone. "Thank you," he said, and meant it in more layers than the surface one. "I want it destroyed," Harry said. Dumbledore looked at him. "I beg your pardon." "The stone. I want it destroyed. It's a target and it's a liability, and Nicholas Flamel has had a very long life." Harry looked at the stone in Dumbledore's hand. "As long as it exists, it will be sought. And every time it's sought, someone gets hurt." He paused. "I'd like your word that you'll discuss it with Flamel." A silence in the hospital wing. McGonagall, who had come back in during Dumbledore's arrival, was looking at Harry with an expression she hadn't entirely managed to contain. Dumbledore said, "You have thought about this carefully." "I've had a few months," Harry said. "The stone should never have been at Hogwarts. I understand why it was moved here, Gringotts was compromised, but a school is not a vault. People I know were in the path of something that should never have been near them." A pause. "Please discuss it with Flamel." Dumbledore looked at the stone in his hand for a long moment. Then he pocketed it. "I will speak with Nicholas," he said. "You have my word." "Thank you," Harry said. Another silence. Then Dumbledore looked at Dinah, directly, the full force of his attention, which was not a small thing. She met it without adjustment. "Ms. Lance," he said. "You arrived very quickly." "I had warning," she said. "Harry wrote before he went in." "He told you not to come," Dumbledore said. His voice was not accusatory. It was, almost wondering. "He did," she agreed. And yet, she said. "I'm his mother, Professor. Telling me not to come is a form of coming anyway." She held his gaze. "The situation was contained when I arrived. I want to be clear about that. He handled it. He didn't need me to handle it. But him not needing me doesn't change whether I show up." Dumbledore was quiet for a moment. "No," he said, and his voice had something in it she hadn't heard there before. Something simpler than his usual register. "I imagine it doesn't." He looked at Harry again. Something between them had shifted in the last 5 minutes, something had been reconfigured in Dumbledore's reading of the situation, and Harry could see it, could see the long-game architect of everything encountering something his game plan hadn't fully accounted for in beginning, not reluctantly, not with resistance, the process of incorporating it. "There are things we should discuss," Dumbledore said. "About what Quirrell told you. About what you experienced." "Not tonight," Dinah said. "He's injured and he needs sleep, and whatever needs discussing will still be discussable tomorrow." Dumbledore looked at her. Looked at Harry. Harry looked back at him with the polite, direct, completely unintimidated gaze. "Tomorrow," Dumbledore agreed. He looked at Harry one more time, the long look, the one that was doing the real work. "Rest well, Harry." "Thank you," Harry said. "For the castle," he added. "It's extraordinary." Dumbledore smiled. The real one this time, Harry thought, the one that was underneath the performed warmth. "It is rather," he said. "Yes." He left. McGonagall followed, pausing briefly at the door to look back, not at Dumbledore, at Harry. Their eyes met. She gave him a very precise nod. He nodded back. She went. Madame Pomfrey descended with the sleeping draught and the non-negotiable position that the injuries required sleep, and she didn't care if Albus Dumbledore himself was waiting, and Harry drank the draught with the willingness of someone whose body had already been arguing for sleep for 2 hours. He lay back against the pillow, and the hospital wing was warm, and Hermione was still beside Ron's bed reading to him, and the draught was working fast, and Dinah was sitting beside him in the chair she hadn't moved from since she'd sat down. "Mom," he said. "I'm here." "I knew you'd come," he said. The draft was pulling him down pleasantly. "Even after I said, I know," she said. "Sleep." "The chess problem Oliver sent," he said, fighting the pull slightly. "I didn't write him. I should write him, I called him from outside the castle. He knows you're fine. He says to tell you he'll have a new one ready when you get home." "Okay." He let the pull take him. "Is it summer soon?" 2 weeks, she said. "Good," he said. "I want to come home." "You are coming home," she said. 2 weeks. He heard her, just barely. Her voice was the last thing before the dark, warm and steady and exactly what it had always been, the voice on the other side of the door, the person who showed up, the one who'd sat down on a wet alley floor and hadn't looked at his scar first. He slept. She sat with him until his breathing went completely even. Then she sat longer than that because she was a person who checked things twice. She looked at the burns on his hands, visible even through the bandages, the mapped pattern of his palms, both of them. She looked at his shoulder, the bruising showing above the neckline of the hospital gown. She looked at the cut on his arm, sealed now. She looked at his face, smooth and young in sleep, the scar visible at his hairline, the glasses folded on the beside table. She had been here 400 miles away holding her phone in a London flat at 9:30 in the evening when Hedwig had come through the open window with the letter, and she had read it and been in the car with Oliver in 11 minutes, and they had gotten to the castle in a way that involved Oliver knowing a man who knew a woman who had a contact in the Fleur network, and she hadn't asked questions because results were what mattered, and she had come into the castle through a back entrance that a very alarmed groundskeeper had directed her through after she'd said my son is in the third-floor corridor and I need to be there in a tone that apparently left no room for a different response. Oliver was outside. She'd told him to wait, he'd argued for approximately 30 seconds and then he'd read her face and said text me when he's okay and she'd said I will and come in. She should text him. She looked at her phone. The text was already there, received, is he okay? She wrote back, yes. Sleeping. 2 weeks and we get him back. She put the phone down. She looked at her son. He had gone into a room with Voldemort and come out. He had done it with 2 months of preparation and 5 years of training and the specific fearlessness that was not the absence of sense but the presence of something that had decided what it was willing to do. He had held on, literally held on, through something that burned him to the bone, and he had not let go. She thought about the letter he'd written. I'm not going in alone. I can manage what's in there. And underneath the pragmatic reporting, between the lines in a way she'd learned to read, I trust what you gave me. I trust that it's enough. It had been enough. She breathed. Slow and deliberate, the breath she'd taught him, the one that said we're still here, we're still working. She let the thing in her chest, the relief that was enormous and still being processed, the fear that had arrived after the fact the way fear did when you'd been too busy for it, let all of it move through her and settle. He was fine. He was asleep. He was coming home in 2 weeks. She reached out and very carefully, barely touching, adjusted the blanket over his bandaged hand. The hospital wing was quiet. Hermione was asleep in the chair beside Ron's bed, the book still open in her lap, and Ron was asleep with his arms folded and his expression even in sleep slightly combative, the expression of someone who would reliably show up again and do it again, which was, she thought, an excellent quality in a friend. Her son had good friends. Her son had done something extraordinary tonight and would wake up tomorrow and ask Oliver for a new chess problem and write letters and go back to class and exist fully and normally in this life she'd been building for him in an alley 5 years ago. The door of the hospital wing opened quietly. McGonagall came in, not for the patients, she could tell. She came to where Dinah was sitting and stood there for a moment, looking at Harry. He told me, McGonagall said, very quietly. In September. In our conversation after class. He said the world would have a version of him in their heads and there would be a gap between that version and who he actually was. She looked at Dinah. He was right. The gap is substantial. Yes, Dinah said. What I mean to say, McGonagall continued, with the careful precision of a woman who meant what she said and said what she meant, is that we were not prepared for him. Hogwarts was not prepared for him. A pause. I was not prepared for him. She looked at Harry sleeping. He's the finest first-year student I have taught in 40 years. Not because of what he can do. Because of how he thinks. She looked at Dinah. You did that. He did that, Dinah said. I just made sure nothing got in the way of it. McGonagall was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that meeting at your flat. I came expecting a protective parent. Something to be managed. I know, Dinah said. I was wrong about what I was walking into, McGonagall said. I want you to know that I'm aware of having been wrong. A beat. And that I'm not wrong about it anymore. Dinah looked at her. The torchlight in the hospital wing was warm and the night was very quiet, and outside the castle the grounds were dark and the lake was still, and Scotland was doing its vast, old, indifferent thing of simply continuing. Thank you, Dinah said. For coming through that door tonight. Thank you for coming through the one before it, McGonagall said. She looked at Harry one more time. Good night, Ms. Lance. Dinah, she said. A pause. Good night, Dinah, McGonagall said, and left. She turned back to Harry. He was breathing evenly. His hands were bandaged. He was extraordinary and he was hers, and the world was going to keep coming for him, and she was going to keep being between him and the parts of the world that arrived before he was ready, and the parts he was ready for she was going to step aside and let him handle, and she was going to keep getting that distinction right, because getting it right was the whole job. That was the job. It had been the job since a London alley and a protein bar and a pair of taped glasses and green eyes that wouldn't look away. She was very good at her job. Chapter 6, What Remains. The drive home took 4 hours. Not because of distance, London was 3.5 hours from the Scottish Highlands on a good road, but because Oliver drove, and Oliver's approach to long drives involved a specific playlist he'd been curating since approximately 2003 that he considered non-negotiable. And 2 service station stops because Harry had never had a motorway service station breakfast, and Oliver had decided this was an omission that needed correcting immediately. Harry sat in the back with his trunk in the boot and Hedwig in her cage on the seat beside him, and he ate a service station bacon sandwich at 7 in the morning with the same whole attention focus he brought to all food, and declared it, with complete seriousness, one of the better things he'd eaten. Better than the kebab? Oliver said, from the driver's seat. Harry considered. Different category, he said. The kebab was an event. This is more of an institution. Oliver looked at Dinah. She looked at her coffee. He's yours, she said. He absolutely is, Oliver agreed. Dinah sat in the passenger seat and watched the motorway unspool ahead of them and listened to Harry and Oliver in the rearview mirror, Harry asking about something he'd read on a service station information board about roadway construction, Oliver answering with the particular enthusiasm of someone who had apparently been holding opinions about civil engineering in reserve for exactly this moment, and let it be what it was without making it mean anything more than itself. It was a drive home. Her son was in the back seat. The windows had the morning light doing something specific to the condensation on them that made everything a little amber, a little soft. They got the second stop for petrol and Harry got out and stretched, and the bruising on his shoulder was visible at the neckline of his t-shirt in a way she'd already assessed and categorized and would be continuing to treat at home, and his bandaged hands held his orange juice with the slight careful adjustment of someone working around healing burns, and he looked at the motorway and the flat Midlands geography around the service station with the same quality he brought to every new view. Fully, without deciding in advance what to think about it. Oliver, Harry said, still looking at the motorway. When did you start doing what you do? The actual work. When did you decide? Oliver leaned against the car. 23, he said. After I got back from the island. A pause. He always paused at the island, not painfully, just acknowledging it. There was a list. Things my father left. People who'd, anyway. I had the skills and I had the reason, and the two things found each other. Do you ever think about stopping? Harry said. Sometimes, Oliver said honestly. Not for long. Harry nodded. Looked at the motorway. Mom, he said, not turning. What about you? I was trained for it, she said. My mother did it. Her mother did it. It was in the air I breathed growing up. She paused. I chose to stay with it. What made you choose? Same thing as Oliver, she said. Skills and reason finding each other. He turned. His green eyes were doing the thinking thing. I was the reason, he said. Not emotionally, factually, checking the map. When you found me. That changed what it was for. It changed what it was for, she agreed. Yes. He nodded. Turned back to the motorway. A lorry went past and Hedwig registered it loudly from the car. Oliver pushed off the car door. Come on, mate. Your owl's going to file a formal complaint. Harry smiled, the easy one, the one that had been growing more frequent since September and by June was his default. He got back in the car and they drove the rest of the way home with Oliver's playlist at moderate volume and Harry falling asleep somewhere in Hertfordshire, his head against the car door, Hedwig's cage close beside him, the motorway moving past outside in that particular summer morning quality where everything was still cool enough to be comfortable and the day hadn't committed to any weather yet. Dinah looked at him in the rearview mirror. Oliver drove. The flat was exactly as they'd left it. This was one of the things about home. It was always exactly as you'd left it, which was the point. Harry stood in the doorway of his room for a moment the way he did every time he came back, checking it, and she watched him confirm that the books were where he'd left them and the second Spinosaurus was on the windowsill and the London map Oliver had sent was still folded on the shelf, and something in his posture completed itself. He turned around. Can we train tomorrow? He said. My hands need another day but the rest of me is fine. Your shoulder needs 2 days, she said. Then we train. He looked like he was going to negotiate and then looked at her face and decided not to. 2 days, he said. What do we work on when we come back? I'll have a plan, she said. There are things from this year that need examining. Like what? Like the fact that you went into a room with Voldemort and came out, she said. That's data. What worked? What didn't, what your body did that your training planned for and what it did that it didn't. We debrief that properly. He looked at her. You debrief everything. Everything, she agreed. It's how you improve. Okay. He put his bag down. Looked at the room again. Looked at her. I'm really glad to be home, he said. Good, she said. Me too. He nodded, satisfied, and started unpacking with the systematic efficiency she'd given him, trunk open, category by category, books to shelf, clothes to wash, equipment to its place. She left him to it and went to make tea and Oliver was already in the kitchen doing the same thing, and they stood side by side at the counter in the particular kitchen quiet of people who had been through several things in the last 24 hours and were content to be somewhere the things had stopped. Oliver put a mug in front of her. She picked it up. He was extraordinary, Oliver said. In the hospital. You told me on the phone but seeing it, I know. He handled Dumbledore, Oliver said. He sat up in a hospital bed with burns on both hands and told Dumbledore to destroy the stone and got him to agree. A pause. He got Dumbledore to agree to something. Dumbledore's reasonable, she said. When he's meeting someone he can't manage, he adjusts. That's actually one of the better things about him. Most people in his position wouldn't adjust. Most people in his position wouldn't meet Harry, she said. Oliver drank his tea. What's next, he said. Not today. In general. The big shape of it. She'd been thinking about this. She'd been thinking about it since the hospital wing, since she'd sat beside Harry and watched him sleep and done the thing she always did, built the map forward, looked at the terrain ahead, figured out what the next set of preparations needed to be. Voldemort's not gone, she said. Quirrell's gone. Voldemort is, Dumbledore thinks he's diminished but not destroyed. He'll find another way back. She paused. The prophecy hasn't resolved. It's moved a step along but it hasn't resolved. So we keep preparing. We keep preparing. But differently. She turned her mug in her hands. He handled himself, Ollie. In that room, whatever Quirrell had, Harry had more. Not just the protection from Lily. The training, the intelligence, the specific thing he does where he doesn't panic. That was there and it worked. She looked at her tea. I need to stop preparing him for worst case and start preparing him for what's actually coming. More specific. More Wizarding World specific. Magic, Oliver said. He's barely scratched the surface of what he can do, she said. Hogwarts will take him through the curriculum. I need to take him further than the curriculum. She paused. And there's the canary cry. Oliver looked at her. You think he can do it? The shout he developed at 8, that wasn't training, that was him finding the same well I draw from. I've been careful about it because he was young and untrained in it. He's not young anymore. Not in the ways that matter for this. Will it interact with his magic? I think it'll do something we haven't seen before, she said. I think when his sonic capability and his magic find each other, it'll be, she searched for the word. I think it'll be something new. Oliver was quiet for a moment. You're not afraid of that, he said. No, she said. I'm interested in it. He looked at her with the expression she'd learned in 4 years of this, the one that was not quite a smile and not quite something simpler. He's going to be terrifying, he said. That's the plan, she said, and heard Harry's voice in that, the 12-year-old echo of a 7-year-old's solemn declaration, and smiled. Harry came into the kitchen at noon looking for food and found Dinah making lunch and Oliver at the table with a chess board he'd set up while she was cooking, the pieces arranged in a problem configuration that was already clearly deliberate. There it is, Harry said. Said I'd have one ready, Oliver said. Harry sat down across from the board and looked at it with the chess problem expression, the stillness, the rapid intake, the slight forward lean. Oliver watched him with the patience of someone who had been doing this for 4 years and had lost approximately 80% of those chess problems and had decided the losing was educational. White to move, Oliver said. I know, Harry said. His eyes moved across the board in the specific pattern she'd watched develop over years, not piece by piece but in structures, relationships, the whole shape of the problem rather than its components. It's Nimzoich, Oliver said. 1930, modified. I know, Harry said again. Oliver looked at Dinah. She shrugged. 3 minutes and 40 seconds later Harry moved a knight that appeared, to her non-chess eye, to be going somewhere unintuitive, and Oliver stared at the board for a long moment and then sat back and made a specific sound that meant the problem was resolved. How, Oliver said. The queen's been the bait since move 7, Harry said. You built the whole problem around protecting the queen so I'd focus on the queen. But the queen was never the threat. The rook in the corner has been 3 moves from checkmate for the whole middle of the game and the queen was in the way of seeing it. Oliver looked at the board. Looked at Harry. I set that up for 2 days, he said. I know, Harry said, not unkindly. The setup was excellent. The camouflage was perfect. I wouldn't have seen the rook at 7. He paused. I saw it at 9. When? When you moved the bishop that looked like a defensive move but wasn't quite defensive enough to be worth the position it gave up. You moved it because it was in the way of the rook. Oliver was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't know whether to be proud or annoyed. Both are rational, Harry said. Can I eat? Dinah put a plate in front of him. He ate. That afternoon they sat in the living room, genuinely sat, the three of them, which was not always something that happened in a flat because all three of them had a productive relationship with stillness that meant they used it for something, reading or training or planning, and it was different today. Today the sitting was the point. Outside the window the London summer was doing what it did when it was being generous, which was bright and warm and slightly unbelievable in the way London summer always felt slightly unbelievable, and the flat was warm and Hedwig was on her perch looking out the window with supreme indifference to everything below, and Harry had a book open but wasn't reading it, which was the tell. Ask, Dinah said. He looked up. I was waiting for you to be ready. I'm ready. He closed the book. The prophecy, he said. The full version. I know the shape of it. I'd like the actual words. She looked at him. He looked back, steady, waiting, the patience that was entirely his own quality, the one she hadn't given him and couldn't claim. She'd been expecting this. She'd been expecting it since the hospital wing, actually, and had prepared for it the way she prepared for all important conversations. She knew exactly what she was going to say. Neither can live while the other survives, she said. That's the operative line. What it means, I know what it means, he said. It means one of us ends the other. That's the resolution the prophecy points toward. He paused. Dumbledore thinks it means I have to be the one to die. He thinks it might be the path of least cost, she said carefully. He's wrong. But I want to be honest about what he thinks, because you need the full picture. Why does he think that? Because he's been managing this for 30 years from the position of greatest strategic distance, she said. He sees the whole board. He sees your life as one piece on it. And he's not cruel. He cares. But caring and being right are different things, and he's gotten so used to the long view that sometimes he loses the individual in it. Harry nodded slowly. What do you think the prophecy means? I think prophecies describe the shape of what happens but not the cost of what gets you there, she said. I think neither can live while the other survives means the situation can't remain, that one of you will, eventually, end the other. I don't think it specifies what you have to sacrifice to get there. She held his gaze. And I intend to spend the next several years making sure that when you face him fully, you are so completely prepared that the cost is his, not yours. Harry was quiet for a moment. Oliver was quiet too, which was Oliver doing what he did best in important conversations, taking up space in a way that made it safe rather than filling it. I'm not afraid of dying, Harry said. I want to say that clearly. I'm not. If it came to it, if that was genuinely the only way, I'd make that choice. I know, she said. But it's not the plan, he said. It is absolutely not the plan, she agreed. Right. He opened his book again. Good. That's what I needed to know. He paused. Also the full prophecy. She told him the full prophecy. He listened to it the same way he listened to everything important, with complete stillness, his processing entirely internal, nothing leaking until he was done. Then he said, born as the 7th month dies. He looked at her. That's me and one other person. There was a boy born at the end of July in the same year. Neville Longbottom, she said. Yes. Voldemort chose you. He chose who the prophecy applied to. So it could have been Neville. Yes. And Neville doesn't know any of this. No. Harry thought about that. That's unfair, he said. In multiple directions. Yes, she said. It is. I'm going to tell him, Harry said. Not now. When the time is right. He deserves to know what was nearly his. She looked at him. You don't have to carry that. I know I don't have to, he said. It's just right. He went back to his book with the air of someone who had resolved the relevant questions and was returning to other business. Oliver, beside her on the couch, said nothing. His shoulder was against hers and she did not move away from it and he did not move away from it, and that was the whole statement, and it was enough. The summer opened up. London in July was the specific version of itself that Harry had grown up in, the smell of the river and the sound of the city and the parks going from green to sunburned gold, and the particular freedom of days that didn't have a school structure. He trained every morning. She'd let his hands and shoulder heal fully before she put him back on the mat, and when she put him back she assessed what the year had done to his capability and found, with the satisfaction of someone whose work had returned results, that he was not the same as he'd been in September. He was better in the ways she'd trained. His speed and precision were sharper, the year of Quidditch having done exactly what she'd theorized it would. The airborne spatial awareness had fed back into ground movement in ways that were visible in the first session. But he was also better in ways she hadn't directly given him. His decision-making under pressure had compressed, the gap between assessing a situation and responding to it had narrowed in a way that only came from experience, from having actually been in rooms where the decision had real consequences and your body had to operate inside that without breaking. She pushed the curriculum. She worked him harder than she had the year before, and he met it with the forward-leaning quality that was his characteristic relationship with challenge, not struggling against the difficulty but moving into it, finding out what it was like from the inside. She started working on the cry properly. She began where she always began, the breath. The canary cry was not a shout. It was not volume. It was frequency, specifically produced, the particular vibration that bypassed the rational brain and went directly to the nervous system, the biological shortcut that her family's specific ability allowed them to access. Harry had found his way to that shortcut at 8, had been developing it incrementally since, and she had been patient about the pace because the cry deployed incorrectly could hurt him as much as it hurt what he was directing it at. The difference between a shout and a cry, she told him, in their first real session with it, is the same as the difference between throwing your full weight at a target and putting your weight exactly where it needs to go. More isn't more. Precision is more. He stood in the training room and listened with the full-body attention he brought to things she was teaching him. The resonance comes from here. She put her hand on her sternum, the specific point. Not the throat. Not the lungs. The chest cavity. The whole chest is the instrument. When I cry, every bone in my chest is part of it. Like the wand, he said. The whole arm, not just the hand. She looked at him. Exactly like the wand, she said. You're going to find that most things work on the same principle from different directions. He tried it. The first attempts were not the cry, they were the shout he already had, excellent in its own right, but operating from the top of the instrument rather than its full depth. She corrected his posture, his breath placement, his angle of resonance. He listened and adjusted, and the adjustments landed cleanly, which was one of the things about training him that remained, after 5 years, one of the purest satisfactions she'd experienced in a training context. He received correction without ego. Correction was information and information was useful, and he didn't waste time being defensive about it. On the 4th day he got it. Not the full cry. A fraction of the full cry, the same controlled fraction she'd shown him 2 years ago, but this time it came from the right place and it came true, and the sound of it hit the target pad and the target pad went 4 feet backward and every window in the training room went opaque for a second with the vibration. He stopped. Looked at his hands. Looked at the target pad against the far wall. That was different, he said. Yes, she said. That was the right place. He was quiet for a moment. She could see him, feeling the resonance still in his chest, mapping it, doing what he did with all new things, memorizing the route so he could find it again. It interacted with my magic, he said. When it came out, it went through the magic as well. Not instead of it. As well. She had expected this. She had not expected the specificity with which he'd identified it on the first occurrence. What did it feel like? Like they were the same frequency, he said. Not, I always thought of them as separate. The voice thing and the magic. But when I used it correctly just then, he searched for it. They were in the same channel, he said. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, she said. He looked at the target pad. What happens when I use them together at full strength? I don't know, she said. I genuinely don't know. That's going to be new territory. He looked at her with those green eyes. Are you nervous about it? He said. Curious, not worried. Interested, she said. The same way you are. He smiled. Okay, he said. Let's find out. Not today, she said. Foundation first. He made the face. She made the face back. He laughed. Hermione came to visit in August. This had been arranged through Hermione's parents, who were dentists and extraordinarily reasonable people who had apparently taken the existence of the wizarding world in their stride in the specific way of people whose professional life required them to deal with irrationality and had simply applied those tools to a larger irrationality than usual. They had been invited to the flat for tea, which had been Oliver's idea and a good one, parents meeting parents, normal ground, everyone finding their footing. The Grangers were warm and a little dazzled and asked excellent questions. Mr. Granger wanted to know how the magical economy worked. Mrs. Granger wanted to know about Hogwarts' pastoral care structure, specifically, which Dinah found immediately commendable. Oliver told them about the best nearby restaurants, which was Oliver's social lubricant of choice and which worked reliably. Hermione had come into the flat and gone straight to Harry's bookshelves with the greeting quality of someone who understood that a person's books were a primary data source about that person, which Harry had found immediately correct about her, and they had been in his room for 20 minutes before anyone suggested they come out, and even then the coming out had been gradual and involved both of them carrying books. They spent the afternoon at the kitchen table. Dinah and Mrs. Granger talked about school, both schools, the overlap and the differences, the way a child who was ahead of the curriculum needed to be handled versus the way institutions usually handled it. Mr. Granger and Oliver had ended up talking about archery, which Oliver did with the enthusiasm of a man who had opinions that were usually classified. Harry and Hermione had, in the space of one afternoon, advanced their friendship from school-based to something more fundamental. Dinah could watch it happening from across the kitchen, the specific process of two people finding that what they'd been to each other in one context translated cleanly to another, which was the real test. They argued about 3 separate topics with the complete ease of people who had established that arguing was collaborative rather than competitive. Hermione disagreed with Harry about something in his notes and explained her reasoning in full, and he considered it, genuinely considered it with visible internal processing, and said, "That's right, actually. Mine was incomplete." And Hermione said, "It wasn't wrong, it was just missing the variable," which was, Dinah thought, an excellent thing to say. At the door, when the Grangers were leaving, Hermione turned to Dinah with the slightly formal directness she used when she wanted to say something carefully. "Thank you for having us," she said. "Harry talks about you, the way he talks about you is how I knew you before I met you." Dinah looked at her. "What did he say?" Hermione considered. "He said you were the most capable person he knew," she said. "And that everything he was good at was either directly from you or came from the way you approached things." She paused. "He said it matter-of-factly. Not like he was being complimentary. Like it was just accurate." Dinah stood with that for a moment. "He's going to be a good friend to you," she said. "I know," Hermione said, with the same matter-of-fact accuracy. "He already is." She left. Harry came to the door and watched the Grangers' car go and then came back in and went back to his book with the easy, full quality of someone who had had a good day and knew it. Ron came the following weekend, with his mother and 2 of his brothers, Fred and George, the twins, who were 16 and immediately and comprehensively entertaining in the way of people who had decided that being funny was their primary interface with the world and had developed it into a genuine art. They arrived with a muggle-baiting joke shop product that Oliver spent 10 minutes trying to figure out, which was clearly the intended result, and Harry watched them work on Oliver with the delighted attention of someone observing a master class. Molly Weasley was warm and large personality and immediately made herself at home in Dinah's kitchen in a way that was either going to be wonderful or territorial, And turned out to be wonderful because she cooked something with whatever was in the fridge that was extraordinary and pressed it on everyone with the energy of a woman who expressed love primarily through food and had decided that Harry specifically needed as much of it as possible, and Harry ate 3 helpings with the focused appreciation of someone who genuinely recognized good cooking, which Molly responded to by looking at him as if he were personally the best thing about the afternoon. She pulled Dinah aside in the kitchen with the directness of a woman who had 7 children and no time for approach. "He's a good boy," she said. "Ron talks about him constantly. He doesn't usually, he's not always comfortable with, some of the people he meets are a lot," she said carefully. "Harry's a lot but in the right direction. If that makes sense." "It makes complete sense," Dinah said. Molly looked at her with the assessing quality of a woman who had been taking the measure of other people's parenting for 20 years. Whatever she found, she appeared to approve of. "You've done well by him," she said, with the directness of someone who had decided this was worth saying out loud. "He's done well by himself," Dinah said. Molly made a sound that was fond and slightly impatient. "You're not allowed to deflect when someone compliments your parenting," she said. "Take the compliment." Dinah looked at her. Then she smiled. "Thank you," she said. "Good." Molly picked up the serving spoon. "Now tell me where you keep the extra bowls, because Fred has already had 2 helpings and George is pretending he hasn't noticed so he can have 3 without looking like he's competing." They found Ron and Harry in the living room after dinner, not talking, which was the measure of a real friendship, Dinah had always thought, the ability to be quiet in the same room without it requiring management. They were both reading. Ron had his chest set on his knee, moving pieces with absent-minded habit. Harry had his feet on the coffee table, which she allowed at home and not in company, and she looked at his feet on the table and he looked at her from his book and she raised her eyebrows and he moved his feet without comment and went back to his book. Ron had watched this exchange. "She just looks at you," he said to Harry. "She doesn't have to say anything," Harry said. "She's got about 12 different eyebrow positions." "I know," Dinah said. "It's economical." Ron laughed. Then he looked at her with the slightly shy directness of a boy who had decided something and was going to say it. "He talks about you the same way my mum talks about my dad," he said. Like the whole thing is organized around you being there." She looked at him. He went slightly red at the ears. I didn't mean, I know what you meant," she said. "Thank you." He nodded. Went back to his chess pieces. The Weasleys left in the evening. At the door Fred said, "You're the one who trained him," to Dinah, in the manner of someone confirming a rumor. "Yes," she said. "He caught the snitch in 4 minutes," Fred said. "In his first match." "That was a training thing, wasn't it? Not just talent." "Talent needs a direction," she said. Fred looked at her for a moment with eyes that were sharper under the humor than his manner usually revealed. "You're cool," he said. "I'm saying that as a professional assessment." "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," he said. "It's just accurate." He and George went down the stairs with the coordinated ease of people who had been moving in tandem for 16 years, and Dinah watched them go and thought that Harry was going to need those 2 in the years ahead in ways nobody had planned for yet, and made a note of it. The last evening of August had a particular quality. She'd noticed it before, the last evenings of August always had it, since the first year Harry had gone to Hogwarts, a slight change in the air that was partly season and partly something more personal. The year turning. The departure becoming close enough to feel. Harry was in his room packing for the second time. He'd packed once 3 days ago and now he was repacking. She could hear him through the door, the specific sounds of a trunk being reorganized, which she'd learned to recognize as his way of thinking through things. He packed the way other people paced. She knocked once and opened the door. He was sitting on the floor beside the trunk with his notebook open, adding to the list inside the lid, the things he'd told her he needed for next year, the preparations he was already thinking ahead to. She sat down on the floor beside him the way she'd sat on the alley floor beside the bin 6 years ago and looked at the list over his shoulder. He'd written in his own shorthand, the notation system she and Hermione had both been taught, the one that was partly mathematical and partly his own invented language. She could read most of it. Training progressions. Reading lists. Notes about Quirrell's abilities and where they'd intersected with his and what that told him about the gap in his own capability. Notes about Voldemort that were strategic rather than fearful, the gap between what Harry currently was and what he'd need to be assessed with the clear eyes of someone who had learned to see himself accurately without either diminishment or inflation. "You're already planning second year," she said. "I've been planning second year since October," he said. "I just didn't write it down until we were close enough that the plan was actual." She looked at the list. "The voice work," she said. "You've put it at the top." "Because I think it's the biggest jump available," he said. "What happened in the training room, when it connected properly, I think there's something there that isn't just sonic. I think when my magic and the cry find the right intersection it's going to do something to the frequency that goes beyond what you can do alone." "Why do you think that?" He looked at his hands, the healed burns, no longer bandaged, the skin still slightly different in texture across both palms, a map of what had happened. "Because when I touched Quirrell, the heat came from both places at once," he said. "The lily protection from my skin and the magic from my core. And they were the same thing. Not two things. One thing working from two directions." He closed the notebook. "I think the cry and the magic are the same thing working from two directions. I want to find where they meet." She looked at him. The boy who had sat in the alley with his chin up. The boy who had asked if he could stay in a flat that hadn't been designed for him. The boy who had named an owl with 3 days of consideration and asked Oliver to be his uncle and eaten service station bacon sandwiches with the focused reverence of someone who understood that ordinary things were a gift. He was 11 years old and he was planning his second year and he had eyes like his mother's and her stubbornness and Oliver's patience and something that was entirely his own, something that had been there in the alley and had only been waiting for enough room to become what it was. "Harry," she said. "Yeah. I want to tell you something." He closed the trunk. Turned to face her, cross-legged on the floor, his full attention assembled, waiting without presumption. "When I found you," she said, I was in the middle of a run I'd been on for 4 years without stopping. No anchor, no structure beyond the mission. I wasn't unhappy. I was very good at what I did and I was doing it and that was," she paused. "That was all of it. That was the whole picture." He waited. "And then I sat down on a wet floor next to a bin and a 6-year-old looked at me and didn't look away," she said. "And everything I thought the picture was turned out to be the margin." He looked at her. "The margin of what?" "Of this," she said. "Of you. Of what it turns out I was actually here for." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think you would have been fine," he said, with the gentleness that was his specific version of directness, not contradicting her but completing the picture she'd started. "Without me. You would have been fine." "I would have been fine," she agreed. "You made me more than fine." He looked at her for a moment with those eyes that saw everything he pointed them at. Then he reached over and put his hand over hers, not a hug, not a lean, not dramatic. Just his hand over her hand, the specific gesture of someone who had been choosing this with full awareness since they were 6 years old. "You're the best thing that happened to me," he said. "You and Oliver. That's the whole sentence. There's not a caveat." She put her other hand over his. The healed burns under her fingers. The calluses from training. The hands of her son. "Okay," she said. "Okay," he said. They sat on the floor for a minute. Outside, London was doing London, the low constant traffic and light sound that had been the background of all of this, the first night and every night since. Hedwig made a sound from the windowsill. Harry looked at her. "She's ready to go," he said. "She likes the castle." "It suits her," Dinah said. "Imperious architecture for an imperious owl." She laughed. He smiled. She stood up and he stood up and the trunk was packed and the room was exactly as it should be, the room she'd set up for a 6-year-old and that had grown with him, the shelves more full and the Spinosaurus at the window and the London map folded on the shelf. Oliver knocked on the door frame. "There's a very good argument," he said, "for fish and chips tonight." "There is," Harry said immediately. "I thought you'd agree. There's a place on the South Bank I've been saving for an occasion." "What occasion?" Harry said. "Last evening of the summer," Oliver said. "That qualifies." They walked to the South Bank in the evening light, which was doing the specific thing London evening light did in late August, long and golden and slightly reluctant, the day taking its time. The Thames was the color of hammered bronze and there were people on the embankment with the loose, full quality of people who had been somewhere and were heading somewhere and weren't quite either yet. Harry walked between them. He had his hands in his pockets and he was looking at everything with the quality she'd watched become more layered as he'd grown, not just the absorbing it but the pleasure of recognizing it, knowing this particular piece of geography well enough that it gave something back. "I'm going to miss this," he said. Not sadly. Just noting it. "The fish and chips?" Oliver said. "London," Harry said. "The specific version of it. Ours." "It'll be here," Oliver said. "I know." Harry looked at the river. "Mum." "Yeah. Next year," he said. "There's going to be something. I don't know what. But it never settles, the pattern of it is that something is always next." "Yes," she said. "Are you ready for that?" "Indefinitely." She looked at him. He was looking at the river, not her, but she knew he was asking her directly and she answered him directly. "Harry," she said. "I sat down in an alley next to a 6-year-old with a protein bar and a broken future and I chose it before I'd thought through anything. I've been ready since before I knew what I was ready for." He turned and looked at her. Something settled in his face, not that it had been unsettled, but the way a thing that was already solid became more solid, found another degree of sure. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. Oliver handed them each a wrapped paper of fish and chips from the stall at the end of the embankment and they stood at the rail eating them with the Thames below and the city doing its vast indifferent luminous thing around them, and Harry ate his chips one at a time with that same original focus, the focus of someone who understood that good things were specific and deserved specific attention, and the evening light did its long reluctant thing across the water. In two worlds, something was always beginning. Voldemort was not gone. The prophecy was not resolved. Dumbledore's long game had a new variable in it that he was still integrating. The wizarding world had been quietly and thoroughly put on notice that Harry Potter was not unclaimed. Hermione Granger was going home to pack a trunk that would contain 3 more books than the list required. Ron Weasley was going to sleep tonight with a chess problem he hadn't solved yet that he would have solved by morning. A corridor on the 3rd floor of a Scottish castle was empty and a mirror showed nothing. And here, on the South Bank, an 11-year-old who had been found in an alley was eating chips with both his parents in the bronzelit last evening of summer, and was home, completely and entirely home, which was the most extraordinary thing of all the extraordinary things. He would go back tomorrow. He would be magnificent. He would be careful. He would write letters and train in the mornings and play Quidditch and sit in the library corner with Hermione and lose 1 or 2 chess problems to Ron on purpose, which he thought Ron hadn't noticed and Ron had absolutely noticed and neither of them would say anything about it because some things worked better unsaid. And at Christmas he would come back here, to this flat, to this city, to this. To Oliver's chess problems and Hedwig on the windowsill and Dinah making tea in the kitchen. To the London map on the shelf and the second Spinosaurus at the window. To the place that was his in the only way places ever became anyone's, not by birth, not by design, but by the daily, chosen, irreversible fact of love. The river went on doing what rivers did. Harry ate his last chip. Looked at the water. "Same time next year," he said. "Same time next year," Dinah said. Oliver crushed his chip paper. "Obviously," he said. Harry nodded. looked out at the river one more time. Then he turned around, away from the water, toward home, and they walked.